All right, Jesse, I'm gonna ask that you read the summary of the written statements and folks online for public comment first, because this is loading for me and I'm having a hard time what's actually written.
Okay, a summary of the written statements.
Oh, wait, can I call us to order? I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
We have one written comment in person. We have one comment in person. We want to have them go first and then we'll dive into the written and online.
Sure.
All right, Natasha Sullivan. And where do we want her to be?
That's it. You want me to have her come right in?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Cindy.
Kind of ran out here.
And stand here.
No, it's just whatever works for y'all.
Hey, y'all. I'm Natasha Sullivan. I am the Education Justice Center coordinator with MTI. It's for those of you who don't know, it's a dual partnership between the district and MTI. A pretty unique position. Thank you. I'm here to talk about Nuestro Mundo School. And I have sort of multiple hats in this conversation. I have the hat of being a parent of 2 children who attend the school, but also the hat of just being a Mexican woman in this community and being in my position as a union leader. But I'm really here to speak on my kind of union perspective. That's kind of lens that I'm focusing on today. Because I'm sure you'll hear lots of parents and community members who will speak on behalf as well. I confess that in my position, I don't think about Nuestro Mundo a lot. I don't worry about them. I don't check in on them very often. And that's actually a problem. I'm not proud of that because I trust in Josh and what he does with his school. It is an extremely well-functioning school. I was just there doing a lunch observation for our food justice work. And I had to have a disclaimer of this is not how all schools function because every part of that system works well. Teachers are typically satisfied, happy there. The retention of staff there is incredible. And I think research shows that the success of a school largely depends on the stability of their staff. So it's interesting because I think this is one of the few professions where when you do really good at your job, you're almost punished for it because you get a lot piled on top of you. And I think it's a problem that I don't think about it and maybe that we don't put enough attention to it because they do so well. And I know, you know, we're on hard times. I know budget is always tight. But, you know, there are very few, I'm going to admit there are very few white male administrators that would get me out here in person today. There just are. And he talks the talk, he walks the walk. I've seen him in spaces where he didn't know I was. Amplifying and not talking over marginalized folks, and every single portion of what he does is truly rooted in his desire for equity in the classroom spaces throughout his building. So if he's asking for something, please believe that it's in the name of equity and not in the way that I think we typically hear that word thrown all over the place because I literally went to grad school because I knew it wasn't equity. I see this in everything that he does. And I think, you know, we can say a lot in our statements, but when it comes down to it, if we're not putting our money where our mouth is, that's a really good indicator of what we value as our district. So I ask to consider the things that he's asking for. And if we really truly value equitable practices, we have to start putting our money there, especially when it's a place that's already being successful with their dollars. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, we will now hear a summary of our written statements. Okay, actually, I got it, Jesse, thank you. One in support of a 5-year charter renewal for Nuestro Mundo and include international, I'm sorry, I'm gonna say IB, primary years program. One in support of current 2 lottery systems at Nuestro Mundo to ensure equal number of English and Spanish speakers in the classroom. One in support of the Nuestro Mundo charter renewal and the inclusion of full day 4K. We will hear from the folks who registered to speak online. I think we have 9. We have 10 people online.
Want to say that blurb about Spanish?
Oh, yes. For public comment tonight, we will have an interpreter for Spanish speakers if needed. Before you start your comment, please let us know if you will be needing the interpreter as you give your comment. Please take periodic pauses for interpretation. Extra time will be granted for interpretation. Our interpreters this evening will be Yvonne. She will be joining us on Zoom. Yvonne, can you please interpret this message now that I'm done reading it?
Yes, buenas noches a todos. Les damos la bienvenida a las personas que necesiten traductor. Por favor, lo hacen saber antes de su mensaje. Tomen pausa para que yo pueda ir traduciendo lo que ustedes van diciendo.
Y si necesitamos interpretación, ¿eso nos da otros 3 minutos o 4 minutos más? ¿O nos da la mitad de tiempo para hablar?
Ah, perfecto, un momento. So if they need translation services, would they get extra time to speak?
Yes.
Así es. Recibirá tiempo extra.
Gracias.
All right, thank you. We'll hear from our first public speaker.
Our first speaker is Jackie Barrera Gonzalez.
Hi. Can I start?
Yes, absolutely.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Jackie Barrera Gonzalez, and I am honored to stand before you today as an alumni of Nuestro Mundo Community School. When I reflect on my time at Nuestro Mundo, I am overwhelmed with gratitude for the opportunities it provided and the foundation it laid for my future. As a little girl, attending Nuestro Mundo meant more to me than just learning in both Spanish and English. One of the key strengths of Nuestro Mundo is its commitment to cultural relevance. The school recognizes and celebrates the diverse backgrounds of its students, creating an environment where everyone feels seen and empowered. This experience allowed me to fully embrace my culture and establish a sense of pride in who I was at a very young age. I was surrounded by a culturally diverse team of educators who embraced and celebrated everyone's differences. This pushed me out of my comfort zone and developed my confidence to dream big and reach my goals. As a young Latina, seeing people who look like me going to college or pursuing a career was uncommon. I didn't know what it meant to pursue a higher education or the amount of challenges I would face in doing so. All I knew was that I had the determination needed to achieve anything I wanted, thanks to the empowering community created at Nuestro Mundo. My teachers worked hard to ensure that every student felt seen, heard, and valued. Their teaching centered on connecting with our experiences, integrating our culture, and making education relevant and meaningful. This is what, in first grade, ignited my passion for bilingual education and language acquisition. It is what inspired my dream of becoming a bilingual elementary school teacher. 18 years later, I can humbly say that I am now part of the 12% of Latinos who hold a graduate degree and will soon be a part of the 4% who hold a master's degree. I am also currently in my 2nd year of teaching at the school that gave me a family and a home, Nuestro Mundo. Now, I don't bring any of this up to boast about my experiences. I mention this to try to put into words the impact Nuestro Mundo has on its students. As a teacher at Nuestro Mundo, I am inspired every single day by the resilience and eagerness to learn displayed by our students. By incorporating culturally relevant content and diverse perspectives, we ensure that every student feels represented and valued in the learning process. Nuestro Mundo allowed me to develop the confidence to believe in myself and my dreams, and now I want to provide the same experience for my students. On Monday, September 30th of 2002, a community with a vision and a dream stood here and presented a project called Nuestro Mundo Community School. The goal was to create equal opportunities for students like me to achieve my dreams. 20 years later, as someone who has had the privilege to accomplish their goals, I ask that you help keep the vision and dream alive. Our school is not just a place of learning. It is a home where young minds are nurtured, dreams are encouraged, and futures are shaped. The impact we have on the lives of our students is immeasurable. And by renewing our charter, you are investing in the future of countless students who will go on to make a positive impact on our community. Thank you for your support and for recognizing the importance of investing in the future of our students.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Uday Oliveras.
Hello, everyone. Hola a todos. Buenas tardes. First of all, I would like to thank the board for your service. As a parent and a board member of the Nuestro Mundo Incorporated, I would like to acknowledge the work and time you all commit to this and to the better of our community. So sincerely, thank you. My name is Uday Olivares, and I'm a parent of 3 MMSD students. 2 of them enroll at Nuestro Mundo. Later today, you will hear about the presentation, but I want to highlight 2 key points: attendance area and transportation. We appreciate MMSD recommendation to prioritize students from Southside, Shank, Kennedy, and Elvium. However, adapting this recommendation would mean the current enroll and internally transfer students living outside of these areas will not be eligible to attend Nuestro Mundo. So what's our proposal? We're proposing maintaining citywide access to Nuestro Mundo and keeping neighborhood ties through a strategic lottery enrollment, as well as adapting a sensible, cost-neutral transportation plan. We believe this is the best way to move forward for our current enrolled and future Nuestro Mundo students. We look forward to your comments and thank you for considering this proposal.
Thank you.
Next is Sarah Thomas.
Hello, I am a parent and a teacher here, and I'm a bilingual parent, bilingual teacher, biracial family. I've been a DPI certified teacher for 18 years. My daughter attends full day 4K at Sandberg, as did my son, who is now in 1st grade at Nuestro Mundo. And I'd like to talk about 4K and the IB program. I read the MEP report and Dr. McCrae's recommendations about full day versus half day 4K, but I'd really be interested in seeing the data disaggregated by language background and socioeconomic status, because in fact, half day 4K isn't even an option for most. The 3-hour program acts as a gatekeeper to exclude many families with standard work schedules or limited transportation. We want to open access and increase equity in early education. And our MMSD stats do show that more students of color and children of parents who did not attend college go to the full day programs. Sandberg even had a wait list for full day bilingual 4K. A good question to ask would be who would most benefit and who wants 4K for the child, but due to the barriers is unable to attend the half day program. Also, I believe an updated, longer term, more nuanced examination of the results of full day 4K will show notable academic improvements for underserved kids. If we expect 5-year-olds to learn to read and write in 2 languages in 9 months, then they need to be fully kindergarten ready. So full day 4K no longer affects my family, but is a true question of equity. 3 minutes goes by really fast, but I'd also like to advocate for the International Baccalaureate program. I taught at an IB school in Uruguay, and I was truly impressed with the rigor and student engagement. Teachers built units of study based on a theme and student interest, and they went deep. These days in DLI here, we fly through massive amounts of disconnected, mandated curriculum in each subject area and never have time to go beyond the basics. And our literacy data shows this basic level. Passionate, longtime bilingual educators I know long for the days of that meaningful and integrated instruction. The IB program would allow us to return to inspired and careful planning, to link language across the school day and improve kids' biliteracy rates. When we had more flexibility in thematic instruction, my Midvale 1st graders, Spanish oral language was superb. on par with their high school AP Spanish buddies that came to visit us. That's what thematic instruction can do. So in closing, Nuestro Mundo has always been a leader and a trendsetter. Let's continue to pave the way and adopt the inquiry-based approach of the world-renowned program, the IB program, and full-day 4K. Please and thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Omar Urquizo.
I'm sorry, Omar, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Is this better?
Yep.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for listening. My name is Omar Urquizo. I'm a parent of a kindergarten student in Nuestro Mundo and also a board member. Today, I want to talk a little bit about also the full day 4K proposal. I have to say that as you know, it has been for me personally as a parent a really overwhelming experience to see Nuestro Mundo as a school working, like experience as a parent, seeing the beautiful job that all the teachers and community around does to it. Having a full day 4K program will give great access and programming for many other families, will support many logistics, eliminate logistics barriers for many of these families. I personally, in my personal and my regular job, working for the county for economical support specialist, I see on a daily basis, I work on a daily basis with family on low income, new immigrants and new members of this beautiful society of Madison. And I can totally tell the impact once the family gets into the school system, once the family jumps into how their kids in school, the resources they see, the families that the other families they found, the establishment, the basis of what having schools kids gives to these families in developing their own future. You will hear a lot of statements talking about the data, but I would like to give you a statement coming from, and I'm pretty sure you understand how big of impact a full day 4K bilingual program will make for families, especially for new families, especially for immigrant families, families that are coming here and knowing little or nothing still about society, or just being new in the city. You will give them a great benefit of starting their kids in a school, in a learning process that is not only for the kids, it's also for the families. The access that they have for resources from being in school is greater. So again, just keep in mind that all this amazing job that you do as a board not only reflects in the kids, but also in the families that are with those kids. Thank you for your time and thank you for the job.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mariana Castro.
Buenas tardes. My name is Mariana Castro, and I am first and foremost the parent of 2 alumni of Nuestro Mundo Community School. However, today I address you as a research director for the Multilingual Learning Research Center at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And I would like to express my support for Nuestro Mundo's charter approval and renewal, and specifically for its expansion to 4K and its adoption of the International Baccalaureate or IB program. I was privileged to be part of Madison's instructional staff for over 16 years, from 1990 to 2006, and then proceeded to spend the next 16 years working for WIDA, an organization committed to the success of multilingual learners. And because of these experiences, I witnessed the transformative impact of early childhood education for all students, but specifically for multilingual learners. A DLI 4K program at Nuestro Mundo would increase access to bilingual families and provide a strong foundation in 2 languages that is also aligned to the mission and vision of Nuestro Mundo's program. Research has shown that bilingualism can enhance executive control, problem-solving skills, and memory, and starting at 4K maximizes these benefits. Having it at Nuestro Mundo would also effectively connect it to the cultural and linguistic goals of the school and enhance the effectiveness of the program, as well as the benefit from the established school-wide culture and resources. As part of my professional career, I had the opportunity to collaborate with schools across the US and also with over 500 international schools when I was part of WIDA and their international programs. And now, as part of the research center I work at, we have over 150 schools. Most of these schools follow IB programs. So based both on the research and my own experience with these schools, I can say that IB offers multiple benefits, both for students and the communities within and beyond the school. The IB program is academically rigorous and challenging, like it was mentioned, stimulating and inspiring. It allows students to excel and acquire the skills and ways of learning that set them up for success in higher education. IB is offered in around 150 countries and has been internationally recognized by colleges and universities from almost 90 countries. Beyond academic benefits, students who attend IB programs become more culturally aware and engage with people and issues in an increasingly globalized and rapidly changing world. Nuestro Mundo already has a track record of academic progress and identity development for multilingual students, including those who have been identified as English learners. Now, adding the 4K and the IB programming will enhance its success and also thrust Madison Metropolitan School District to national and international levels of excellence. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you. Say hi to Amy for us.
Will do.
Our next speaker is Sandra Rivera.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you. I'm sorry, we still can't hear you. All right, we're gonna call somebody else and we'll try to come back to you at the end. You might wanna like reset in the meantime. Our next speaker is.
Next speaker is Mariana Pacheco.
Hi, buenas tardes. Good evening. My name is Mariana Pacheco, and I'm a professor of bilingual education at UW-Madison, where I have the privilege of helping to prepare ESL and bilingual education teachers. I'm also a former bilingual education student and a former bilingual education teacher myself. And more importantly, I'm the mother of 2 bilingual children. When I considered where to send them to school, I knew I would try to send them to the only all bilingual school available to us. As the only all bilingual school, Nuestro Mundo values Spanish and Spanish speakers by implementing a 90-10 model, which means that Spanish is used 90% of the time as English is added across grades. So very much unlike most bilingual children in Wisconsin and across the country, I've witnessed the effects that an all bilingual school with a 90-10 model with all bilingual teachers and staff can have on bilingual students' linguistic identities. I also want to address the value of 4K. Research has demonstrated the incredible success of efforts to develop children's readiness for language literacy and content area learning in schools, especially for historically underserved students, including those who come from non-English speaking homes. But it's absolutely imperative that 4K build on these students' rich language and literacy practices in the classroom. This kind of teaching requires effective bilingual teachers to consider how to develop thematic and cross-disciplinary teaching that expands the linguistic skills and content area learning of bilingual 4K students. There's no doubt that 4K will benefit the youngest Nuestro Mundo students, but I want to urge you to approve the full day 4K option. It creates optimal conditions for bilingual teachers to continue to think longer term about how to create stronger links across the curriculum, across classrooms, and across grade levels as they implement a full day 4K. In short, students and teachers need a full day to enable this complex work. I want to close by speaking in favor of Nuestro Mundo's key decision to implement an IB program. This program will bring attention to an innovative, globally minded program that challenges the way we think about language, bilingualism, and learning. IB takes a student-centered and inquiry-based approach that challenges teachers to think about themselves as facilitators of students' critical thinking and growth as global citizens. Of importance, IB programs require schools to develop their own language policy, which means that Nuestro Mundo would be able to continue its DLI programming. This IB program would also support bilingual teachers' involvement in decision-making and provide more meaningful professional development that is catered to their unique professional circumstances. Options like the IB program, in addition to the seal of biliteracy that already exists, provide a vision about the kinds of possibilities that exist for bilingual children in Wisconsin. So please support Nuestro Mundo's charter renewal and support their vision. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is?
Next speaker, we will give Sandra Rivera another shot.
And Jesse, how many do we have left after Sam?
More after her.
Oh, Sandra, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, yeah. We're gonna bring the next person up. Sandra, if you want, we can try one more time, or do you wanna? Okay, okay.
Next speaker is Tamika Bryant.
Hi, everybody. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. My name is Tamika Bryant, she, her pronouns, and I am a Nuestro Mundo mom. I have a 5th grader named Tay, and he has been in Nuestro Mundo since he was a kindergartner. As y'all can see, I'm Black, my son is Black, and he has had a wonderful experience in Nuestro Mundo. My son also has a stutter, and I have been amazed at how welcomed he has been in Nuestro Mundo, how he's been celebrated. They've been having every single year since he was in kindergarten, they do a presentation for his classroom to explain stuttering and to kind of get rid of the stigma. So I just really, really appreciate that he goes to a school that embraces him. And because the school embraces him, the teachers embrace him, it's creating a environment for the students to embrace him as well. Also, with him being a Black student, there's not that many Black children at Nuestro Mundo. And when I sent him there, I was very, very nervous about that. Had a meeting before Tay entered kindergarten with Mr. Forehand to address it. And Mr. Forehand has always been welcoming, even in a collaborative way, working with other Black parents and parents who have Black children who are not Black, creating a celebration of African American history. And this will be going on to the 6th year this year, and the theme is Black Renaissance. And Mr. Forehand has been such a champion of it's like more than inclusivity, but just celebrating. Even a mural was very instrumental in a mural that showed a variety of skin tones that was done by 2 Black local artists. So I just want here to say my support for Nuestro Mundo renewing their charter. Also, for what it's worth, thank you for letting me be able to hear the meeting on Zoom. I am using my phone. I don't have access to a computer. So I just want to say that it is a barrier. If somebody had to have one like a device for streaming and another device to be on the Zoom in the waiting room. So thank you for letting us just do that all on one device. I don't want to go over my time, but so thank you so much for hearing me. And I just really want to emphasize how amazing Nuestro Mundo has been for my child's education experience.
Thank you for joining us. All right. I'm gonna do a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting, and then I'm gonna move that we switch item 4 and item 5 so that the folks who are joining us here tonight can hear that conversation before it gets too late. So I move to approve the minutes from the instruction work group meeting dated November 6th, 2023.
Second.
Second, Board President Nichols. All those in favor? Aye. Can you all see Nikki?
Yeah, I see her now.
Oh, I see her. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, 7-0. Thank you. I'm gonna move that we move item 4 to after item 5 so that we hear from the Nuestro Mundo community and the renewal of their charter before we hear about the behavior education plan.
Can we have a point of order for folks that are not on the board or an admin to turn off their cameras?
Yes, if you are not part of the board or the administration, do you mind turning off your camera?
was really hard for me to know who was.
No, it helps. It's like thinking about, do folks mind if we move item 4.1? We switch item 4.1 and item 5.1?
Yeah, to make a motion to it. Yeah, to make a motion.
I'll move to do it.
Second.
Second, all those in favor? Aye. All right, 7-0. We will now hear from our superintendent, and then we will start our conversation about Nuestro Mundo.
Thank you, Board Member Muldrow. Before we start this evening and talk about our Nuestro Mundo charter school, I just would like to take a moment to acknowledge the passing of former Superintendent Daniel Nearad. Dan served as a superintendent of MMSD from 2008 to 2012. He valued collaboration and was always willing to listen. As part of his legacy in MMSD, Dan is credited with starting 4-year-old kindergarten in the district. He had many accomplishments, including being selected as Wisconsin Superintendent of the Year in 2006. The Board of Education will formally memorialize Dan at their regular meeting on Monday, December 18th. Thank you. And at this time, I will defer to the team to begin our conversation around the Nuestro Mundo charter renewal proposal.
I would love to do some shifting with school staff here and others for the behavior education presentation. Should we?
I mean, if I wanna. Oh, there you can. Okay. I don't know if they're just kind of chilling.
So thank you. Great to be here with you. My name is Josh Foran. I'm the principal of Nuestro Mundo Community School. This is my 11th year as principal at the school. Prior to that, I worked here in the multilingual Office of Multilingual Global Education. And prior to that, I was a teacher at Nuestro Mundo. So it's been a big part of my life for the past 19 years. I'm grateful to be joined by Francesca. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Francesca Rodriguez. I am the former president of NMI. I was president for 4 years, 2 daughters that went to Nuestro Mundo. I am the parent of 2 MMC students and here today to continue my support of Nuestro Mundo.
Before we continue, I want to quickly express my gratitude on behalf of Nuestro Mundo staff, families, and students to the Department of Building Services for their support throughout the move to the Frank Alice building and all the work that was put into the building over the summer. I want to thank Cedric Hodo and Marcy Simonson for their leadership and responsiveness to the much needed updates to the building. I want to thank our summer custodial team, Jorge Araujo, Greg Connor, and Tracy Cunningham, and multiple substitute custodians who worked through the triple-digit heat and the Canadian smoke to get the building ready for our staff and students. All the painters, the carpenters, plumbers, pipe fitters, and everyone else involved, thank you. I receive comments on a daily basis about how wonderful our building looks. So we have really tried to pare down our presentation to focus on the major shifts that we're proposing for the next 5 years. After multiple meetings between Nuestro Mundo Incorporated and MMSD administration, I'm happy to say that we're in large part unified on many aspects of these proposals with some key distinctions that we'll touch on as part of this presentation. As you know, there's a lot of information included in the slides that we provided. In retrospect, maybe 85 slides was a bit excessive, but this is a rare opportunity to share our story and the successes and challenges of our school that have contributed to the level of dedication many of us feel who work at the building or who are involved in the community, and what compels us to do more and to do better. I hope you all have had an opportunity to review the additional information. In the interest of time, we also removed much of the contextual information to the actual proposals that we're making, which is included at the end of the slide deck as a reference if needed in our conversation.
We can go to the next slide. So just to set up some context, I mean, we all know here that Nuestro Mundo is an instrumentality charter, right? Like, why have an instrumentality charter? To try to do innovative, unique things, right? Like, we can be a lab space, we can be a playground, you know, a sandbox to try different things. So it's with that spirit that I hope in framing and context that you'll listen tonight with some of our ideas about how to continue, how we would like to have you continue to use us as this instrument. And, you know, you said our charter school, that really warmed my heart, Lisa, when you called it our charter school. So what we are presenting tonight, I like Josh said, I don't think we're that far apart. Some other things, like you just touted how amazing our building is and how amazing our staff is. I just want to call out 3 stats that are in the director's cut 85 slide of this presentation, but I think they're important to say. 100% of our families and students say that they feel welcome at Nuestro Mundo when we do a student family survey. 95% of the staff says they like coming to work. What was that other stat? It was feel welcome. No, so
I think it's okay.
I ruined my own thunder. The point is, there's people like families feel safe there. 94% of families feel safe sending their kids there. I call it lightning in a bottle. It's such a special place. So that all set up in our framework here. What we are going to offer up today is a proposal for full day 4K. Considering an IB program that's going to be at no cost to the district. NMI is completely prepared to pay for this. We have the budget to pay for rolling out IB, and then providing a sensible transportation solution to a broader attendance area. And we are completely supportive of the district's recommendation to provide transportation contracts for parents. So just want to say that up front, because we are going to cover a lot, but those are the 3 main points tonight. Sure, I can talk a little bit about IB. So I think generally, like, we know that IB is a kind of a global view of education, right? Like, it considers the student and the teacher as in a more global context, which being in a dual language immersion school, that's sort of in the ethos of the school, right? It is by learning another language, you connect with other communities. You can also go deep and it's transdisciplinary. Thank you, transdisciplinary across math, science, PE. And we know that from research that this type of transdisciplinary education is a really rich way to learn 2 languages.
So if you look at the slide here, it's essentially the same content matter that we're already teaching, that all Madison schools teach. The two really important factors to understand are the transdisciplinary themes and the learner profile. So if you can go to the next slide, Jesse, please. So you see there the 6 transdisciplinary themes. So for example, for the month of September, for 6 to 8 weeks, we'll all be focused on who we are. Who we are can encompass identity, one's own identity, culturally relevant literature and teaching practices. And we kind of start from the self, and then we move outward to understand our place in a global society. On page 42 of your printed charter application, you can see what the learner profile looks like. And so another important aspect of this is that we are working daily to nurture these characteristics within our students that will lead to critical thinkers, to lifelong learners, to peacemakers. So in a nutshell, that's kind of like the key elements of the program. So the recommendation of the school district is not to move forward for a couple of reasons.
At this time.
At this time. Yep.
At this time.
but I want to talk a little bit about why we feel it's important to continue to advocate for this. No doubt you've been presented data related to the impact of school closure and virtual learning for students in Madison and across the country. I want to bring to your attention the exponential impact the pandemic has had on language learners. In a dual language program, that means students striving for English proficiency and Spanish proficiency as well. There was a near total cessation of second language development during those years. And virtual learning on a structural level, despite the efforts and innovations of our teachers, proved to be minimally successful for language development. All of this has led to lower language proficiency than we've ever seen in the past. Many of my colleagues with dual language programs in their schools share similar concerns and experiences. During the pandemic, we were charged to rethink our approaches and to be responsive to the needs of our students. Upon the return to school, in-person school, much of our professional learning and focus has been spent on implementing new curriculum. Benchmark, Adelante, and Advance, Amplify Science, Bridges Math, which reaches to before the pandemic. The curriculum is not the problem. These are strong curricular materials. However, the focus on the particular materials and the implementation of those materials themselves has taken our instruction in the opposite direction of content integration and second language acquisition. So today, I think one of our public appearances mentioned how the learning is sort of siloed from one content area to the next. What IB can do for a program like ours is put us back on a path toward content and language integration with teacher training, supports, and a network of like practitioners. And so on the next slide, I'd like to just kind of take you through an example. One more, please. And one more. And one more. Okay, there we go. So this is an example of what the day might look like from the perspective of a student. So we start from a point of inquiry, and oftentimes these are student-led inquiry. A student has a question or a wondering about the world. The teacher grabs onto that and builds standards-based instruction around that. So an example of that might be, how does the climate impact us, and how do we impact the climate? So as a student goes through this unit of study within a particular day or throughout a week, they're going to touch on a similar theme and similar vocabulary and language usage in science, math, reading, language arts, the arts, as well as social studies. And that's really the power that a program like this holds, is the ability to have a framework to build language around, not just language, but content mastery. And so students are bumping up against the same themes, the same learning points throughout the day. We can go to the next slide, please. I think I may have rearranged this. Can you go back to? That's it.
Yeah,
Yep.
there we go. Okay, so NMI has like I said, has the designated fund to ensure that all the teachers are certified, trained in IB, the principal, the accreditation, everything for 5 years. So no cost to the district. I did want to mention the reason I said ... for now, right now, is that when we got the memo back from downtown about, hey, can you guys kind of wait on this? It's a transition right now with the superintendent. We sort of think whoever the superintendent, I mean, it's a pilot. It's going to be a pilot in that first year. It's a 5-year kind of, we'd like to have this in our 5-year charter renewal. So sort of kind of, we can do it, whoever the superintendent is, kind of our approach, we're ready to do it. And we also have a fundraising goal to make it go beyond 5 years. The board leadership is really strong now that, I've rolled up as president, and there we hired our first employee at NMI who works about 15 hours a week. So we really are in a place right now more than ever to do an aggressive fundraising goal over the next 6 years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so in terms of like teacher training, teacher development, There are multiple options within the International Baccalaureate system for training teachers, and it's flexible enough to fit into the existing PD structures that we have through the MMSD calendar. It will require us to have a divergent PD plan than other schools within MMSD. I know there's also some concern about what happens, after fifth grade, and there may be benefits at the middle and high school levels associated with the IB approach. However, we maintain that the benefits in terms of content mastery and language development at the elementary level are enough to set students on a course for success, regardless of programming that they find in middle or high school. And no promise needs to be made that this would continue. The benefit is there from this type of programming in a dual language program, K through 5 or 4K through 5th grade. And so we're proposing a pilot to further the school district's knowledge of the impacts on targeted marginalized groups that a program like this might have. It can be compared to other students who are not yet or do not have access to this sort of programming. And regardless of the transition to a new superintendent, the data will bear out whether or not this program works, and if it's a good fit, it's a good fit.
I'll just say one more thing about competition. If you want an IB program right now, you can get it at a price at Madison Country Day has IB.
Well, so the only school offering this in Dane County is Madison Country Day, which is a private school. And it's very important to us to expand the diversity of students who have access to that programming. We across the whole city, we're seeing lots of immigration from Venezuela and Central America right now, fleeing economic hardship and political turmoil. Having just harrowing experiences along the way. I'm sure just about every school who has a bilingual program or who are receiving students from Venezuela right now have some of these stories to tell. And to me, part of this is about, you've heard how widespread the IB program is across the world, and it tends to be used in private schools like American schools or international schools. And so to me, to look at some of the students who we've just received in the past month coming from Venezuela, to give them the opportunity to have the same educational experience, the same level of education as the landed elite and the politicians in their home countries who created the conditions that forced them to flee. To me, that's powerful. And that's the driving force for me behind this program. And you can see, if you advance a couple slides, Jesse, please, you'll see, it is an investment. However, Nuestro Mundo Incorporated, myself as principal of the school, I feel that this is a worthy investment. Again, Nuestro Mundo Incorporated has funds available for startup costs and a strategy to continue funding this, so it is not a cost to the school district. The first 5 years, if you kind of work this out, based on our current enrollment, is going to be about $175 per pupil. Subsequent years after those first 5 would be about $65 per pupil. So we ask that the board consider this pilot approach to this innovative program.
We're at 15 minutes.
Okay, yeah. So that takes us to 4K. Yeah, we want to be brief and yeah. So really, this comes from the 2020 referendum family input sessions, which were occurring, I believe, the fall of 2019. There was a really strong voice among our families for a robust bilingual early childhood experience at Nuestro Mundo. At the time, we were at the Maywood building, and we did not have, we had no space. We didn't have the space to accommodate that desire or that request from our families. We have that space now, so we're very much interested in exploring that. And we appreciate MMSD administration willingness to allow us to explore that. the distinction here is we really believe that for the population of families and students that we want to serve through this program, it has to be a full day program. You guys know full well the value of 4K. You've seen the value of full day 4K. The MEP report talks about many of these benefits to our families. We don't need to take a lot of time on this, I don't think, because we know so much about this. Only that it's very important for us to have a full day. You know, we have there's a half day option across the street at Monona Grove Nursery School. And it's a Madison 4K program, half day. My children went there. That's not necessarily a demographic that we're looking for this program. We're looking to bolster pre-literacy skills, particularly for our English learning population, as well as other populations of color who come into our schools. We want to see those students entering kindergarten with similar levels of pre-literacy as other more affluent white students that we have coming into the building. That's what this proposal is all about. So some of the details are there, just working closely with the early childhood department and the multilingual services department, make sure we're in compliance with local, state, and federal compliance related to identification of English learners, using some of the screeners that we have available to us now to make sure that that we have seats available for our students who are Spanish-speaking English learners, and a program that looks very similar to what a bilingual 4K program might look like at Sandburg or Henderson, other places that have bilingual 4K.
But we'd be unique and that we'd be the only DLI.
Uniqueness would be that it is a two-way dual language, which means that we would have a balance of native English speakers and native Spanish speakers in the classroom. So let's move on to attendance area. A sobering quote there, 88% of students attending Nuestro Mundo who receive bus transportation currently are students of color. This is first and foremost the basis of our advocacy for continued transportation. We want to focus more right now on the attendance area. We know right now is not the best time to come to any sort of solution around attendance. Franny earlier mentioned
Transportation.
Sorry?
We want to focus on attendance, not the bus, not the.
Thank you. Parent transportation contracts, we think that is a sensible approach right now based on where we're at. So with attendance area, there's just one distinction that we need to tease out. So this has been kind of it's been very confusing. We've been trying to work with Department of Public Instruction, Charter Schools Department to really understand the changes that came about through Act 55 a few years back. And so I think we've come to a place where we have a common understanding of what we can do in terms of being a charter school and having or prioritizing a geographic location within the city. So one way to do that is to designate and add an attendance requirement a geographical area. So for example, it could be like the proposal states Shank, LVM, Kennedy, South Side. If we add that as an attendance requirement, that means that only students within those attendance areas have access to our school. And according to DPI, that would be immediately and uniformly applied across the school, which means that anyone living outside of those attendance areas would no longer be able to attend unless we request a waiver from DPI saying we would like our current students to have the opportunity to continue in the school until they leave us in 5th grade, similar to what we're doing with the students from Monona and Cottage Grove who came into our school while we were at Maywood and Monona. The issue with that is, I mean, I believe that there's precedent that waiver would be accepted because they've done it before with Monona Cottage Grove. However, the students coming into 4K or kindergarten would not be part of those legacy students who continue to have access. And so we would only be able to bring in students from those attendance areas. The other approach that was detailed to us from DPI is to leave admissions citywide, which is what it is right now. And instead of just prioritizing one attendance area like we do with Southside right now, in the lottery, you can broaden that and request a waiver to prioritize a geographical area. And so for us, that would be LVM Kennedy, Shank, and Southside. And so I believe that waiver would be approved. It's not, obviously nothing's 100%, but I believe that it would be approved. And that would still allow us, allow our students who are coming to us through internal transfer or open enrollment to continue to come into the school, and it would continue, our school would continue to be able to accept those students in the future. Currently we have 94 students, about a third of the school coming in through internal transfer, another 36 through open enrollment. And so.
The map.
Yeah, thank you.
Or the, yeah, there we go.
So each blue dot is a family living in Madison, who attends our school. You can see that we are spread out across Madison and the outskirts, the surrounding suburbs. However, the majority of our students are still coming from Southside attendance area. It's important to us, so we're kind of balancing, yes, we don't want to be exclusive to that geographical area. We want to be able to bring in students from anywhere in Madison or through open enrollment. However, it's also important to us to have be tied to have roots in our attendance area, in our feeder pattern. So the majority of our students still come from Southside, and if you add in students coming from LVM, Shank, Kennedy, that constitutes the vast majority of our students. And so, you know, it's very important for us to stay rooted in that community as well, which is why we would pursue that waiver to prioritize those attendance areas in our lottery admissions. Okay. I think I've explained everything. You have the budget projections in the presentation as well as the printed materials. You'll see here we kept we added 4K, a projected 4K enrollment of 24 students, and we kept enrollment the same over the course of the next 5 years for budget projection purposes. And as like most schools, if you look at the per pupil multiplier, are operating in a surplus, which goes to fund peripheral supports such as central office and other ways that schools are supported. And Nuestro Mundo is no different in that. And I think that that does it for me. Would you like to add anything else?
No, that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
Before I turn it over to the board, I want to ask Cindy Green and our administration if you all have anything you'd like to add.
I do not.
All right. I think the areas of focus for us as board members is one, kind of how we feel holistically about the charter renewal process and whether or not folks are in favor of renewing the charter. And then about kind of the new initiatives outlined this evening, if folks want to speak to those. I think that makes sense. We do have 2 major areas tonight. I apologize for that. But they only get to have this conversation with us once every 5 years. And so I'm hopeful that we can do it justice this evening. Board President Nichols.
Thank you. First of all, let me just start by saying thank you so much for all of the hard work that is obvious in this proposal. This is very, very thorough. So just it was I enjoyed reading kind of the richness of the school. So I'm gonna focus my questions just kind of on what you're proposing as new in the renewal. And I do want to start with IB. And then my second area is around the attendance and the enrollment, just because I need to make sure I'm understanding. Okay, so let me start with IB. So what I do know about IB, just from other exposure that I've had to IB, is that it is amazing. It really does provide a rigorous, comprehensive opportunity for learners. So I'm happy to see that you all are considering it. However, I also know that schools that seek IB accreditation, it's a heavy lift. It is a lot of work. And not only do you have to work really hard to get accredited, you have to work really hard to maintain the accreditation, which ultimately comes down to staff. So I'm curious if you've thought about kind of what that heavy lift will look like, and how do you know, I guess, if your staff community is feeling up for that? Yeah, so I'll just start there with kind of the rigorous accreditation that comes with IB.
You're right, and not every school who applies for IB sort of accreditation is approved for it. So it would require a couple things. So our instructional coach would also be considered an IB coordinator. Right, and so much of that work would be working with teachers around unit planning, around instructional practices, and the shift to that method of teaching and that sort of programming. We would utilize, like I mentioned, the structures that are built into the calendar, like welcome back, the release days, early Mondays. Much of that would be utilized for unit development, for teacher training. There's a lot of planning that is involved. And so we would continue with our ICS work, our Integrated Comprehensive Systems for Equity, which is something we're very much aligned with the school district. So that work would continue. But beyond that, it would be pretty much all IB with the release time that we have with teachers in order to meet that, that rigorous demand.
You want to talk about what happened when you talked to the staff about it?
Oh, right. So initially we surveyed staff. 75% were very much excited. Yeah, let's do this. We're on board. There were a few who were like, I need more information. It was kind of early on in the exploration. I know that just in my daily interactions with teachers, particularly teachers who have been doing dual language for a long time. You heard it from Sarah Thomas, who's a teacher, a DLI teacher here in the school district. Thematic teaching is ideal for our sort of program. It's ideal for the instructional model. It's an approach that teachers believe in and enjoy. It's fun to teach in that way, and it's independent of curriculum materials. So it would not require the purchase of new materials. It may require using materials in a different way. Or most materials have scopes and sequences. Sometimes, we cut and paste on that. But we have a keen eye on standards and making sure that we remain standards based and that we are covering, all the standards that our students should have access to in a given year.
Which does lead me to my second question, which is, At our last instructional work group, which was just a month ago, we had this amazing group of teachers and instructional coaches come in and talk about all of the literacy adoption. So we heard kind of middle school and we heard elementary. And I guess what kind of stuck with me from that presentation, particularly at the elementary level, was that I heard folks saying like, well, last year was the first year, but we're really counting this year as the first year because last year was the year of unpacking the boxes. And this year we're really like working hard to do all of the planning and like thinking about how we're going, you know, like integrating all of the curricular materials. And, you know, it's a lot of work, but we're seeing amazing engagement from our students and our, you know, in their learning. So what I'm not clear is like, what happens with the K-5 literacy adoption while you're also asking your staff to learn a new way of teaching through IB? And do you envision that like as a charter, that's where some of the innovation is? You know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to figure out what the balance is when we're just early on in the adoption of new curricular materials, even though I hear you saying it's not just about the materials, it's about how we teach.
That's a good point. And so what I can say to that is we have a very skilled instructional coach, Wendy Samaka, who led our school last year into really diving deep with the benchmark materials, sometimes to the chagrin of some of our teachers. But it was really important to both of us that, you know, any set of curriculum materials is a huge gift to a school. And the ability to use those materials to the best capacity possible is a very important part of what we do. You know, each school, a charter school like us, we don't have the capacity to purchase that sort of curriculum. And so we did dive really deep with those materials. We have started content we have to adapting those materials this year. The materials themselves, for the most part, are very good. And I feel that with the 2 years that we have under our belt with these materials, the ability to be more judicious about which particular mentor text or stories or which particular standards go or fit best with each of those 6 transdisciplinary themes. For me, that requires teachers to use those materials in an even deeper way than they might if they're just following the scope and sequence that's provided to them. And so it requires really looking at the texts. It requires looking at the peripheral supports that are provided by any set of curriculum materials, such as decodable readers, intervention materials. And I feel like when teachers have the ability to kind of look at those in a more judicious way, okay, is this meeting the need that I want and that my students require through this transdisciplinary theme? How does this fit with what I'm doing before and after my literacy block? I do feel like it leads teachers into a deeper relationship with those.
So you didn't say it, but in some ways it means that you all would need the flexibility not to follow kind of the scope and sequence as maybe envisioned. That's what I'm hearing, right? Like, because you might need to really look at like, here's the IB 6 transdisciplinary themes. Maybe there's something in this scope that fits best and something else that doesn't. And maybe lots of schools are doing that anyway, but it sounds like you would need that flexibility. I think one of the downside potentially, and I don't know this to be true, so I'm just thinking out loud, is that if you end up being the only IB school in the district, you probably wouldn't be able to count on a lot of support from curriculum and instruction. Now, that means you get to blaze a trail, you know, but it probably, you probably wouldn't get tons of support, but maybe the larger IB organization would be there. And I don't know if that's a downside or not. I'm just saying, like, in case you're thinking about ways to implement and innovate, it seems like that could be a potential downside.
No, yeah, I mean, we've been there before. So
Okay.
The early years of Nuestro Mundo, we were blazing our own trail.
Yep.
I was there teaching kindergarten, making our own materials, everything. But that's, I mean, that's true. That's one of the things that draws me to the IB program. There are other ways or systems that are similar to this, but none of them have the level of training and support that IB provides. And so
Can I mention one more thing too? So we, you know, Ann Gillespie is a former IB principal from Chicago, you know, at Shorewood. She's the principal at Shorewood. And she was kind of talking us through how they opened their school, their IB dual language immersion. So we'd be blazing a path, but there's
Not, yeah.
right.
There's other examples.
There's other examples of singular IB schools in other districts, and we have through Ann, like, been connected, gone to visit, like, there's a network there. So yes, blazing a trail, but we're not a first mover in this.
Yeah, I don't, and blazing a trail in my mind isn't a bad thing. I'm just
I
saying.
hear that about.
Right,
Okay.
right.
I went on the IB website, because you know I was nosy like that. I didn't see anything that showed IB in like a dual language setting. Now, I was trying to poke around. I'm not saying that it isn't, but like,
Yeah, there.
so you know
there is a
examples
school
of
in
schools?
Chicago, yeah.
Okay. Because it did not look,
It's
it's
actually,
worldly, but it didn't look,
it's actually a school that Ann helped to start.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, there's a school at Milwaukee, Alba
Oh,
Yeah.
school. But what one last comment. So being the only 90-10 school in the district, we benefit greatly from CNI's work. We worked very closely with Melissa Vasquez last year with Scope and Sequence.
okay.
But we're still retrofitting things.
Yeah.
Because it was created for a 50-50 program. And so you know, we utilize a lot of those materials, but we do have to adapt them to what we're doing, you know, in-house. And we have the expertise in the school building among our teachers.
Right.
One other thing to mention is that when you do the accreditation, there's a planning year, right? Like, there's a whole
Okay.
year where you're working on submitting that for accreditation. So it's not on day one door opens, you have to be IB. You have a runway, right, to get to before it becomes a school.
Sounds like you've thought it through a lot. Generally, I like the idea of us having an IB school in our district. So I really appreciate the kind of the thought you put into that. And this connects me to my last question, which is around the enrollment and attendance. Because it feels really attractive to me as well that families who might not ordinarily be drawn to some of our other schools might be really drawn to Nuestro Mundo, not only because you're dual language, but because you might also be offering IB. So I just need to make sure I'm clear. So when I read the proposal, and I don't know if this is saying the same thing or not, I see a couple of references to like a Senate La Follette kind of geographical priority. And I also see Southside Shank, Elvium Kennedy listed. Are those the same? It's different. I just want to make sure it's the same.
Well,
Because
our original proposal was the Follett attendance area.
okay,
In working with MMSC administration, we kind of narrowed that down to those 4 attendance areas.
okay.
For
So it's for like
That-
neighborhoods
For
or,
schools within those, yeah.
yeah, okay.
they're all
Yeah.
still La Follette feeder schools. You're gonna shrink the pattern by focusing on those 4 elementary schools. All of those elementary schools feed into the Follett, but they don't all feed into Senate. So some of them feed into Whitehorse.
Okay, I think that's why I was starting to get thrown, because I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So you are okay with kind of an all citywide access with a priority geographic lottery or kind of system that would go to Southside, Shank, Elvium, and Kennedy?
Yes.
Okay,
And just to be clear, because if, you know, if that waiver weren't granted, if we had the admissions requirement to exclusively pull from those attendance areas, essentially we would lose over a third of our students.
yeah,
So,
I saw that.
so yeah, that's our preference.
Okay, great. Those are all my questions then. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Board President Nichols. Further questions or discussion from the board? Board Member Mosner-Feltman?
Thanks. Thank you. I have two questions. One is about the idea of like Nuestro Mundo and an instrumentality charter as a lab or playground or experimental site. And I don't know the history, so I'm curious, like, are there examples of times in Nuestro Mundo's past that you've been able to pilot something that goes great and can go out into the rest of the city? I would love to hear about some of those times. My concern is that it will be great, and 5 years from now, it'll be like, well, it's great, and there's no actual potential for it to be great beyond scale.
Do you want to talk about 90-10 or?
So, yeah, so, prior to 2004, when Nuestro Mundo opened, there were no dual language immersion schools in Madison.
I'm listening, I'm just writing.
Sure. And so the most salient example of this would be dual language immersion itself. And so now it's in, I think, 9 elementary schools, 4 middle, all of our comprehensive high schools. And all of that started with Nuestro Mundo. Now it's the school district's key strategy to comply with the state bilingual bicultural statutes of bilingual education. And so, you know, I think that is that's really, you know, the most obvious example. Beyond that, you know, after MMSD started developing more dual language programs, we haven't really served in that role in a very long time. And so, you know, it's another reason for us, you know, looking to be that school to kind of fill that role within the school district.
And just to add on to that, it is incredible. I mean, you said we were the first, or we helped start dual language school. I mean, yes, they are classrooms around the district, right? Or different schools, but to be in a place where the whole school is in Spanish. I had my first experience going into a school where that was not the case, because my kids have been here, and it was yeah, felt marginalized. It was an interesting experience after having gone to a place where a language, a culture, a way of being was centralized, and it is unique. So like Josh said, definitely was a first mover in the district for dual language. Now we want to, like, we've been kind of laying low on the innovation. We want to turn up that volume again. So that's kind of why we're here with this radical idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My next question is, can you talk about like just like the institutional history of like when and who came to the meeting and said, have you heard about IB program? Like, can you talk about like what the genesis of this was in the organization?
The genesis within the organization. So like I mentioned, I have conversations on a daily basis with teachers who are looking for ways to implement dual language immersion the way that it was meant to be implemented, as thematic integration. that's really where this came from. No one came to us saying, hey, you should try IB.
Yeah.
It was really about, okay, you know, I keep hearing this from my teachers, what options are out there? And
We
you know-
considered a few things. I mean,
well, there's micro societies, there's a few other things that are really cool options. However, like I mentioned, none of them come with the level of training and support that IB provides.
I mean, I'll just say it frankly as well, like being close to a 2X charter geographically, we were also thinking strategically, like, you know, you have to, if you're coming off the Beltline, you have to pass one city to get to our school. And, you know, they're doing their own special thing, but we thought, okay, if we're gonna be competitive as well, like what can we do that's part of our mission and part of like the philosophy of what Nuestro Mundo was?
Board Member Mr. Cutland, are you good for your questions?
Good, thank you.
All right, Board Member Castro.
Thank you. Just quick comments and 2 questions. So I think it's just worth pointing out that the Latinx community here in Madison, you know, and all of our diversity has been the fastest growing demographic in both Madison and MMSD. So I think this partnership is really important between us to serve the needs of this growing group of people here in Madison. And one last point, I think it's not lost on me when we did the 2020 referendum, the whole purpose of going to Frank Alice was for Nuestro Mundo to get larger and to have a building that they can call their own. So I'm happy to hear that the renovations over the summer were successful. I guess the first question I have is, can someone kind of explain the logic or rationale behind the 375 enrollment cap right now that's in the district proposal?
So that part of that was to look at over the next 5 years on how the school will be able to grow.
Okay.
In addition to that, thinking about with them adding on the 4K, that would account for the number of staff and the human allocation that we need to come through for that grows. So at 375, we're looking at that will be an additional allocation of 6 staff members on that.
Got it. Okay. My next question is that for the attendance area challenge with busing, I know you explained it during the presentation, but it gets a little confusing. Could you explain again, like how that transportation system would work in your proposal?
Well, I should preface it by saying, so we were working with the transportation department and did confirm that MSD is charged by about, but to date, I don't have like a firm answer of what would the cost of that would be. And so the idea to do this in the most cost-effective way to provide a bus from those attendance areas would be to designate a bus at each of those schools to add one stop at the end of their route. So for example, if I'm a student in Kennedy attending Nuestro Mundo, I'd get on the bus. That bus would drop kids off at Kennedy. I'd stay on the bus. Last stop is at Nuestro Mundo. So that was kind of the idea, the most cost effective idea that we came up with. But again, understanding like current capacity and things like that, that's not something we're promoting over something like MMSD's recommendation of parent contracts, which I think is probably the most sensible option right now based on what's going on.
Yeah, I think with all the, one moving to Frank Alice for the bigger building for the opportunities to grow. In fact, this is a fast growing demographic, certainly don't want to inhibit any opportunities for further enrollment through all of our transportation issues, regardless of Nuestro Mundo. And then my last comment is, in general support of 4K, needing to learn more about IB. I came up here in Madison, so I have no experience or exposure to IB, but definitely want to learn more about IB and just think about how that fits in with all of our middle school and high schools and what they offer as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Castro. Further discussion or questions from board members? Board Member Pearson?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, in the book, the information. So my question is around IB. I think, Nichelle somewhat alluded to it, and then also Sabian just mentioned in his comments, of how IB, how you guys are looking, proposing that it connects with our middle school and high schools. Because that is not a program that is offered that way. And I know that I also need to look at IB website, but more so like how they like structure it. They have the primary, and then they have middle, and then they have high. And so, I guess, how are you guys envisioning this fits in? Because those students then will go to middle school and be a part of a educational structure that is completely different. And so.
No, that's a good point. And I guess, my response would be we would be sending students to middle school with higher degrees of bilingualism, higher degrees of biliteracy,
Critical thinking research.
Who have, actively participated in this, local citizenship, and who have studied, matters concerning our country and the world. My daughter is a student at middle school right now, and a lot of the work that she brings home, give a shout out to Ms. Reinke, is very much, it's language arts, but it's language arts that's couched in issues that are relevant for, 12, 13-year-old, 14-year-old kids. The materials are very diverse. The subject matter is would be something that we would be preparing these kids to encounter with in middle school. I believe that a strong foundation with IB in elementary school would also prepare kids to benefit from AP courses in high school. I'm thinking about everything that Madison offers in terms of the early college STEM Academy, all of these great offerings that we do have at our high schools. I do feel like we would be preparing them to take those opportunities, take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, I know that if you are to get accredited, there are similar to like the AP kind of like realm in high school. Students can earn certain credits and certain credentials from being part of that. And so as we are having the conversation, it's just how is that movement, and then how are then students accessing, and what is the conversations that we're having with families so that they know that even though this is offered in this space, this is not going to be offered in these spaces, because I don't want families to be feeling like there is a continuation between the curriculum of both. And I'm not really sure exactly just from their website, if you are to get accredited in elementary, if there are, other than the foundational skills, the benefits like, well, in elementary, I took IB in a sense, and what that might look like in the future. So I'm not exactly say that. And then my question is just after the 5 years. So I think Nichelle alluded to this earlier, of that the first couple years are your unpacking, from what we've heard from our new curriculum, is unpacking years. And so I'm envisioning that the actual implementation years would be probably in your third or maybe fourth year. After that 5th year, I know that you do have, or you're looking to have the funding after the 5th year. Depending, because we all know funding structures are really difficult right now for all types of schools. if you are unable to meet those needs, for further funding for the IB program, I guess, what are your contingencies or plans? Are you looking then to request funding from the district to support that? Or are you all looking then to maybe stop the program? I guess what kind of contingency around that?
Well, I mean, so the Western Mundo Incorporated's board has had, you know, months worth of conversations around this and whether or not this is feasible, without having to come to the school district to ask for funds, because again, serving in the role of the instrumentality, we want to be able to do these sort of things without being a financial burden school district. So I mean,
Can I say something about that?
sure.
So the current board has committed to this 5 years. We are in a really strong financial position to pay for the first 5 years. The board has, I would say unanimously agreed to that. I could take this back to the board and say, should we put a contingency plan in place? Or, you know, what is our plan B? Because your kids are going to graduate. Mike, you know, the board turns over, right, as kids graduate from Western, but I hear what you're saying, and I would love to take this actually back to NMI and say, okay, what is our backdrop plan if we can't raise the $10,000 we need every year?
What I will say, just to close that, is that you know, currently the board has shown the ability to raise the amount of funds needed for the annual fees and maintenance of the program.
Yeah, we exceed that every year already, but yes.
And then I guess my last thing is just, and it's a question not for you all, but more so for the board and administration of what we are looking to, how we are looking to approve this. So are we looking to approve, and this at the regular board meeting, are we looking to approve based off of the new application that was submitted to us with all the requests that Mundo had? Or are we looking then to tweak it based off of our own kind of conversation? So like, say everyone is in favor of all day 4K, but not in favor of IB. Are we looking then to make those kind of motions, and then will they have to go back and revise the application and then come back another time? I'm just trying to figure out like the ask. Yeah.
So at the full board meeting in December, the motion will be just to approve the charter.
Okay.
That's it. Right, with the recommendations, and then after that piece of it, between January and February, we will begin to work on the contract. That will then come back to the board. We'll have all the other items inside of the contract.
So when you say the recommendations from the district or recommendations from New Mundo?
So we will make some recommendations based upon this conversation, and that will be recommended to our superintendent.
Okay, thank you.
That will come.
Further questions or discussion from board members? Board member Simpkin?
I'll just jump in. I don't have any questions. I just want to share, this is one of the more exciting proposals for me that has been work since I've started. I don't know a whole lot about the International Baccalaureate, but what I do understand about it is that there's a lot of similarities behind the approach and what I know of as being the highest quality in early childhood education. And so when I think about the transition period for students from one system to another, while it might be a challenging transition from being in that system as an older elementary student to going to middle school, that's the same transition that our children make now, sometimes going into kindergarten. And so that transition is going to happen at one time or another. I love the thematic approach. as an early childhood person, that's what we do. It just makes sense. It puts everything in context. It makes learning much more fun, and it does make teaching much more fun. So I know all those things. When it comes to your 4K, in general, I have a lot of caution around expanding 4K because of the community-wide implications. However, I think that when we're talking about a very specific population that is likely to be at least, I'm guessing, 40 to 50% first generation folks in our country, I think that there is a really strong argument for moving to a full day program for those 4-year-olds. I think that that's just going to be advantageous on so many levels, as far as transitioning to kindergarten, as far as transitioning their families as well. I can see how easily that can really support that early elementary years. And so I'm just really excited to see where this might go. I also think that the whole idea of a charter school is to try new things and is to figure out, well, what could we do if we had all the space and time to do that? And the fact that you are not asking for any additional resources is of course a relief, because we so I really do as well.
Thank you, Board Member Simkin. Board Member Vandermeulen, do you want to chime in around the renewal? Yes?
Yeah, let me unmute. One, I think the expansion of 4K is absolutely necessary. I would be for that. Two, regarding the charter itself, I absolutely am for renewal, because unlike a lot of things, it's an instrumentality charter. I like that it works with the board. I have grave reservations on International Baccalaureate because I don't know enough, and that's why I have the reservations, because I don't know enough to make that decision. So I have to teach myself, and I will do so. But that's why I do worry on that, primarily on how it affects individuals with disabilities as some of the larger questions over time. I know we have some studies that show over maybe 1 year or 2 year, but I want to know over time if that's how long and how much of an effect it will have. And I think that's incredibly important. So I need to do my research, but I think the proposal is excellent. You write slides like I do, 85 slides is not uncommon for something I do, so I can't judge you there. Thanks.
Thanks, Board Member Vandermeulen. I want to wrap us up by saying I fully support the renewal of the New Estro Charter. I think it's important to think about the growth of New Estro in comparison to the growth of our 2X charters. And so if we want folks to be innovative within the context of our district, we have to set them up for success. Josh, I want to thank you for your long-term commitment to this school and this district, and for joining us here tonight after, Monday is always a long day. But I also want to say that I think 4K or expansion of any services is complicated right now, in part because of staffing those opportunities. And I am particularly confident that Nuestro Mundo will have the ability to staff 4K because you have an incredible stability among your staff right now. And so you don't have to worry about kind of filling vacancies throughout the year. You can kind of focus on what it means to allow for this expanded early childhood opportunity. As far as the attendance area goes, I think that the reality of transportation is a multifaceted and really complex thing to look at in a variety of ways. And what I like about the parental contract is that it does mirror what the district has to do for private schools. So if you take your student out of our district and send them to a private school, this district is obligated to pay for that child's transportation or reimburse that family for that child's transportation. And so the fact that we are providing that to folks who want to stay in the district but want a different option, I think is a really positive solution, and it is incredibly encouraging to see you all work with our administration to come up with that. So as far as IB goes, I think that there is a tremendous opportunity in piloting IB at Nuestro Mundo, and I really look forward to, if this board decides to vote that way, you know, seeing what that means for our young people. I also want to acknowledge that it's not easy to get something paid for in its entirety. Fundraising is really challenging. I'm a professional fundraiser. And so I appreciate the additional labor you all have taken on in ensuring that the resources used to implement IB are independent of kind of taxpayer dollars and allow for us to embrace this without absorbing the cost of it. That is it for my comments this evening. Greatly appreciated you all joining us, and I want to thank everybody who showed up to speak during public comment and encourage us to engage in this conversation this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah.
All right, our next conversation is I just want to ask board members, we need a break before we have the BEB conversation. Okay. Yeah.
Keep on chugging.
All right, let's do it. Welcome our behavior education team. If you want to start this conversation off by acknowledging this is the third time the BEB so we are having an ongoing conversation about the behavior education plan, and hopefully be a productive conversation that's informed by the work we've already done. Cindy, you want to take it away?
Thank you so much, Board Chair Muldrow. I am just going to confirm with Jesse that we have the rest of our presenters online. We should have Patrice Hutchins, who's an assistant principal from East High School. Ryan Incity, who is our restorative justice coach from East High School. Lily, who is our progressive discipline coordinator on. And then in person, we have Alana, who is our district-wide that many people know, our restorative justice coordinator. We have Leah Esser, our executive director. And we also have Pat Nichols, who supports high schools right now, who's also Lana's partner in restorative justice. I think she might be to know. So we have people virtual and people in person for our presentation for tonight. Jessica, did you want to do the slides? Yeah, you can, that's fine. We'll what am I? Yeah. So as you all know well, our 3 strategic framework goals, each one of these goals, I think you will see present in our presentation tonight. But I think goal 2 is something that we're going to be lifting through our principles of behavior education. Next, Jesse, please. And always, we want to make sure we're leading with our amendment 3 core values. Next slide, Jesse. So tonight, this is a little flip. We already did the Nuestro Mundo Charter renewal. Tonight, we are going to do an update on the behavior education plan. Board Chair Muldrow said, we've been here a few times talking about our behavior education plan because we know we need to put forth some recommendations to the board for improvements in that area. As a reminder, we came to you in August and we provided a timeline at that point that showed what we were going to be doing throughout this year to really dig in, learn where we're doing well, learn where we need to make improvements so that when we come back to you in the spring, we have a set of recommendations for the board to consider to revise in terms of both our policies as well as our procedures related to the behavior education plan. Those of you that have been around, if you can believe it, we are going on to 10 years of the behavior education plan. So tonight we're going to share what we have learned and also where we are hoping to suggest improvements. Two of the areas that we are going to focus on tonight that we're very excited about is we have East High School, where we really want to do a spotlight into the work we've been doing around restorative justice at that high school, what we are learning from them, as well as what we are doing from a system-wide perspective. We're also going to show some of the early things we've identified in our year of learning for improvement. And those are areas of potential misalignment that we're seeing as it goes to our behavior education plan, as well as to the policy components of the behavior education plan. Next slide, Jesse. All of this is anchored in the focus that we have this year around our district improvement and our school improvement that we've been talking about every to these 4 goal areas. Most specifically, this idea of engagement, literacy, math, and high school completion all are critically important as we think about what our behavior education plan is or is not doing for our students. Next slide, please. The guiding principles that we are using this year is that we focus as an entire system on everything we do around our goals, really thinking about that improvement science. And also as we're thinking about data literacy, getting better at routines this year to actually reflect and adjust along. Next slide. I think the other thing you will see tonight is we are really focused on this idea of getting better at getting better. So the work the team has done tonight is really digging into where we're doing things well. How do we do that better? How do we consider scaling? Where are we not doing well? Where do we need to adjust, reset, or stop doing something? So that is going to be what our focus is. Next slide. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Leah Esser, and she's going to take us through the next few slides.
Thank you, Cindy, and good evening. Tonight we are going to be taking a historical look at the last almost 10 years of behavior education policy implementation. It's an opportunity for us to reflect upon and understand the impact of our past practice to inform our policy and implementation in the future. Next slide. In 2014, I don't feel like I'm old enough to have been around and doing this in 2014, but I am. We shifted our policy and approach to school discipline, working to address disproportionate use of exclusionary practices, in particular for our Black students and our students with IEPs. Next slide. Our pre-BEP out of school suspension data illustrates what we do not want happening in our schools, those disparate outcomes for our scholars. But to facilitate and influence change at that time, we had to be able to articulate what we were going to be doing or should be doing instead. So to that end, we developed a set of beliefs that were established both to guide the shift in policy, but also to help support and focus our implementation priorities. At that time, next slide, once the beliefs were fully codified, the board also endorsed a set of guiding principles that we have since depended upon to ensure alignment between our policy and our practice. Next slide. And beliefs and guiding principles alone are simply not enough to impact our outcomes. Meaning, we needed to set and establish and set goals that would more directly guide our work around behavior education plan, both from a policy perspective and implementation. Next slide. So then we have to ask ourselves, nearly 10 years later, how are we doing? And we've identified some encouraging increases in students' feelings of belonging around goal number 1 of the behavior education plan. And it's really, really critical that we work to understand more deeply the root cause of this positive outcome. On the other hand, however, we have seen a dip in the percent of scholars who feel safe in their schools. So similar to how we would need to and want to dig in to understand our positive results, we also need to work to fully understand the root cause of that shift as well. Next slide. As is the case, or was the case with the slide related to safety and belonging, we have mixed results as it relates to our use of out-of-school suspensions. Primarily due to policy changes and the lack of availability of out-of-school suspension options, we have eliminated that form of exclusionary discipline at elementary school. At high schools, we have seen a recent decrease in the use of out-of-school suspension, which our colleagues from East will discuss further in a moment. That being said, we do see a concerning and marked trend, increase trend in the use of out-of-school suspension in our middle schools, pretty steadily, but pretty drastically, and since we've returned from the pandemic. Next slide. As is the case with those first two data points I shared, our results again are mixed as it relates to our decrease in disparate use of exclusionary discipline, especially specifically out of school suspension. So the good news is that we've seen a steady decline in the disproportionate use of out of school suspensions for students with IEPs, but unacceptable disparities for our Black students still exist and persist, requiring us to really, truly, authentically ask the question, what next? So, frankly, though, we've been asking ourselves that same question of what next for almost 10 years. Together, we've made really, really significant policy changes that I'm very proud of, and I hope that the board feels proud of their work around policy and really aligning our approach to behavior with what we believe to be best practice and research and evidence-based practices. However, despite those policy changes, our outcomes have not substantively changed. So you'll see on the screen in front of you the policy changes that we've made each year. This is not an exhaustive list of our policy changes, but just generally some shifts that we've made to become more inclusive, more restorative, and more progressive. And at the same time, we've been responsive to our data, trying many things to improve our implementation and impact our data. And as a district, we've been so responsive to our data, and we've tried many strategies to impact outcomes. If you take a look at the screen, Jesse, if you can just click through about 8 or 10 times, I think 10, you will see that each year of behavior education plan implementation, our focus shifted. We've tried many strategies to impact our outcomes, but these frequent shifts in our approach to implementation makes it very difficult to understand and evaluate our implementation to the degree we truly need to. And we are really looking forward in this next iteration to prioritization of a sustained implementation plan with a strong, aligned, and integrated evaluation system. Lastly, before I turn it over, one of the key responsibilities of our central office team and our role is to provide schools with the support and resources necessary for implementation of the behavior education plan. So at present, we allocate 47, next slide, Jesse, sorry. We allocate 47 PBIS coaches and 4 restorative justice coordinators that are in our high schools. And each year we continue to make significant annual investments in professional development and partnerships aligned with the BET. And we'll continue to do so, but really through the lens of intentionality, integration, and sustainability. So thus far today, we've discussed the past, the present, and at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Lily Hangartner, our coordinator of progressive discipline, to talk about what we're doing moving forward in the future.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Leah. I know that I was before you last in August. And so, Jesse, if we could do next slide, please. Thank you. So I think this is just meant to represent sort of the outline of this year's work as we first sort of started discussing back in August at one of the last meetings, just to outline kind of what we expected this year's progress to be kind of by quarter. So just quickly as a reminder that we are at the beginning of Q2 now, and our hope is that by the end of Q4 that we will have all of our policy and practice updates completed and ready to present to you, the board, to vote on, with the goal of rolling out our training and professional development and implementation of any changes before the start of the 24-25 school year. Next slide, please. And so quickly, just to highlight that what we have spent so far much of this school year doing is really doing a comprehensive data review. Some of those points Leah has already discussed, but just really looking at different areas where we are collecting data to see what that tells us about the direction that the behavior education plan and any policy shifts should be going, to make sure that that our thoughts and what we see as goals is aligned with what the data is telling us as well. Next slide, please. And so in keeping with that, we wanted to just sort of highlight some of the 8 guiding principles that are listed within the current behavior education plan, and to voice that we still strongly believe that those guiding principles are still should be moving forward priorities for us. And so we sort of are highlighting 3 of those 8 here, just to show that as we reflect and prepare to adjust and make policy changes to the behavior education plan, that it's important to sort of assess and understand where our current alignment is between those principles, policy and practice. And so just as kind of one example, the guiding principle that we believe strongly still, we should be moving forward with, that we're grounded in a strong focus on engagement and learning. But then looking at the data to reflect how that guiding principle might be misaligned with just what the data is telling us. And so you can kind of see in that last column, just voicing that we know what we're seeing from behavior incidents is that 47% of our total behavior incidents are for behaviors such as leaving the classroom without permission, disruptive classroom behavior, and being in the hallway. And so just kind of being cognizant of that as we move towards, determining what policy shifts will meet the principles that we are naming in the behavior education plan. Next slide, please. Sorry. Sorry, I have my kid in the room. What I wanted to just also mention before I turn it over is, as Cindy and Leah have indicated, what we thought was really important to this evening was also to spotlight a school that is doing some really meaningful work on some of our foundational practices in culturally responsive teaching, developmental designs, as well as restorative practices. And just to show how that does and can continue to impact our data in a positive way. And so just also voicing that we still strongly believe that those foundational practices that you see before you in this slide are still priorities, and how those can show up and live in everyday practices in our school communities. And so with that in mind, I would like to turn it over to Lana Stoltzfus and the East High School at Cat Nichols and the East High School team to sort of discuss how these practices are showing up in daily practices at school, and how it's impacting their culture and climate within a school community.
Don't do that.
Yeah, thanks, Lily. So with restorative justice, we are focusing on 3 primary ways of supporting schools. The first is something that we sometimes refer to, the first group of schools is something we sometimes refer to as spotlight schools. It's a group of schools where the leaders have opted into targeted supports for elevating the restorative justice work. And this includes the 3 YWCA schools, Blackhawk, Cherokee Heights, and Wright. It includes several middle and elementary schools that are being supported by district staff. And I think we could also include, even though it's not middle and elementary, we could also include Capital and Shabazz, because they fit the other criteria, and they are high schools that do not have an embedded restorative justice coordinator. There are also a handful of other schools who want to be in this group,
who made some commitments and some investments into being in this group in the summer. But because of capacity and other kinds of conditions that they're experiencing, have not been able to get as far in it as they would like to. So the part of the intention here is to learn from these schools what is working in order to build on that capacity and scope across the district. So our second area of focus is with significant adult conflicts, which we are noticing in increasing numbers, particularly in the past year. Conflicts sometimes among teams, and to the extent that it is getting in the way of their work with students, and we're helping to address those in order to have a stronger foundation for their work with students. And we are working to create systems of support and guidance for leaders and staff to address these conflicts and sometimes harm in restorative ways and using restorative processes. The third area of support is with high schools. Most of you are aware that we now have full-time restorative justice coordinators, MMSD staff at each of the comprehensive high schools. And for those with those staff, we, Kat is the lead on this work right now, but we are providing pretty intensive support and coaching for them. And we are providing or hosting regular opportunities for the four of them to collaborate with each other, to curate and develop resources, to problem solve around issues that come up, to develop systemic and consistent ways of doing this RJ mindset and practice work in the schools. And now we, as has already been mentioned, we have the privilege of hearing from one of those schools, Brian in City, who's a restorative justice coordinator at East, Patrice Hutchins, an assistant principal at East, who is very supportive of this work in many ways. I think Patrice is going to go first as they talk to us about their experience. So Patrice.
Thanks, Lana. If we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so this is just a little bit of data from East High School, just around out of school suspensions from September 1st to November 27th from the 2019-2020 school year up into this school year. Obviously, I will be the first to say that we are not where we want to be in terms of out of school suspensions. We would like that number lower, but just want to think about or just notice the numbers going down, especially this year. In terms of last year, one thing that we were really focused hard on was making sure that we had good data and that we were intentional about documenting every behavior and really trying to move through the progression and use the BEP with fidelity, which is part of where I think we had why we had a spike last year, is really around putting some strong systems into place in terms of supporting all students. And then if we want to go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about what we've been doing. So starting with the big piece that we've been focusing on is shared beliefs amongst our staff. So that's looking like how are we training our staff? How are we starting Welcome Back with a really strong focus on culture and climate? How are we showing up for our students? How are we welcoming them, supporting them? And that is strongly tied with restorative justice and developmental designs. The last 2 years, those have been really, really big focus areas for us, partly because we have seen them work, and we wanted to really take a minute to set those up in order to continue to move forward in other areas, because we know that if students aren't in class or if they aren't in a place to learn, then our teachers aren't able to teach. So we spent a lot of time working on staff beliefs and mindsets around our students. So both with developmental design and restorative justice. One other piece I want to highlight is taking the time to train our staff. So having Brian has been amazing as a restorative justice coach, but also being able to utilize our deans as areas to support the restorative work that's happening, because they're seeing a lot of the behaviors. They are our primary like referrals for restorative work and really using those for alternatives to suspension. The other piece where we've been working hard is around teaming structures. So we've been able to be really intentional about the work we do with our SSIT teams, as well as the last year we began a behavior intervention team, which consists of our MTSS coordinator, our RJ coordinator, and our deans that can come together and weekly look at behavior. Prior to last year, that wasn't happening on a regular basis, and it really made it hard for us to know what was going on, to notice trends, things like that. With the implementation of that team, we've also been able to do a lot of push-in into classrooms where we've noticed a high number of behavior referrals in order to help support the culture and climate in all of our classrooms. The other piece that we have worked on is our school has we're very fortunate that we have some skilled folks who are trained and are trainers in developmental designs. And that is something that we have been able to utilize with a lot of intentionality. In particular, one area that we've been able to focus on is having a cohort of staff get trained this past summer. And they've been coming together on a regular basis to talk about their practice, where maybe where they've seen success, where they're struggling, and use each other as supports in that area. And that's been a big focus area for us, because as much as we're using restorative practices, we're using developmental designs too. And then the other piece is we've been working with our behavior response team. That team consists of folks who actually are not staff who are suspending students, and it's really focused on it being restorative. So we have spent time with them and kind of having so that just to make sure that everyone has a similar response. But ideally, like, they're going to the classroom and they're trying to support the student in what's going on, and whenever possible, even just watching the class so that the teacher can have that conversation with the student and really be able to build that relationship or repair that relationship. And again, this goes back to what we've been focusing on with developmental designs, being able to focus on relationships first so that there is something to restore to, and then also just repairing and problem solving as much as possible. So it's just really that's been a big area of focus for us. And then the last piece I just wanted to uplift is we still have work to do, but we've been really intentional around our mindset and bias shifts so that we are giving the message that every student at East belongs, and that we should all be going in with all adults should have the mindset that all of our students want to do well. And what do we need to do to support them in doing that? So we have, we spend time talking about equity. Today we are actually doing PD, and it was in circle around, just talking through challenging behaviors. And so one thing that we're continuing to work on is how we're showing up for our students and how we are building a space that is really intentional with belonging and support. And so with that, I will turn it over to Brian to dig in a little bit more with restorative justice.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Hutchins. I'm Brian City, the restorative justice coach over at East. Excited to share with you some of the good things that we're doing in the building. So thank you for the time. Really, the thread that runs through everything Patrice shared is this intentionality with creating and maintaining relationships. That's the heart of restorative practices, restorative justice, this underlying philosophy of doing school with students, not doing school to students. And that's something that our principal, Ms. Smith, has been proactive, intentional in the messaging, both last year, this year, as long as I've been there, in that grounding philosophy. Like Patrice said, like Ms. Hutchins said, it's about the belief work, and that's really what makes it transformative. So just to add on a couple of things that we're focused on this year, our universal tier 1 practice that we're really dedicated to is restorative conversations. And so these are small conversations, sometimes bigger, but a lot of times smaller conversations that repair something and change something that was negative into something positive. It is a practice, but what changes it from a practice to a tool to transform the culture is the relationships, and it is the student buy-in. That's why, working with Miss Hutchins, who is so highly skilled in building relationships, that's where we can have the creative flow, creative space to do different things besides going to punitive consequences. It's about the relationships, and not only Miss Hutchins building those relationships all the time, but also Miss Green and Miss Lipinski and Mr. Richardson. All our admin team is all in on restorative practices, so it enables us to do a lot connected with the students. Some other focus areas that we have, just deepening that mindset through the work of AVID, DD, equity. Like Ms. Hutchins said, we're working on that today. We're continuing our work on alternatives to suspension and getting more creative and doing more things through conversation as opposed to consequences. And that work is just enlivened by our amazing dean, Miss Ortiz, who was doing double the work this semester while we were filling it. We did just get another amazing dean. Miss Gruder came over and strengthened our team. So the deans are really spearheading that work and allowing staff, students to learn from difficult situations and move on. And that has been incredibly positive. We're celebrating tier 1 practices, both restorative conversations and circles. And we're continuing to build our availability with coaching, consulting, and PD. My position is pretty flexible. It's wonderful to be able to provide that just in time PD or support that teachers need. You can see the strengths that we have up there. A lot of those are highlighted. I'll put some numbers behind these strengths. So far, these stats that I'm reading are just stats where I or the dean was present. So these don't even tell the whole story, but with the dean or I, we've done 17 classroom or group circles this year. We've held 56 formal restorative conversations. We've had 24 formal coaching sessions where we're blocking off time and digging into a problem. We started our RJ implementation team, and we've met a couple of times, and we have our RJ club, Restorative Justice Club, has met 5 times, and that's a student leadership club. Because like I said, all of this is driven by student buy-in. It doesn't work if the students don't believe in it. And so just a real focus on elevating student voice, getting students involved. And I guess the last thing I'll share is one very good positive that we've seen more this year than last year, definitely, that the groups of students that are requesting circles, conversations, fix-ups are Black and brown students. And what we're hoping that means is that they're bought into the system, they're finding trusted adults, and they're having good experiences when we do these practices with students and staff. With that, I'll just pass it back over to Ms. Hutchins if you wanted to add anything else. Would that be okay?
Yep. And I think the only other thing we just want to add is we know that we still have some challenges. Like I shared, we still have more suspensions than we would like. We still have some disproportionate data that we need to continue to work through. And also we know that there's some challenges that we'll continue to problem solve around. One area is just there is no easy fix for a classroom culture or support that happens. And so how are we able to support our staff when there are some struggles and do that in a timely manner and be able to come back and repeatedly continue to offer support. Another piece is just providing that support in a timely manner. We are so fortunate with Brian that he is able to really be flexible and to get to students. Like if there's an issue with a student and staff member, that is usually tied up prior to that student returning to class the next day. But that also means that teachers are giving up their prep, and we know that that's definitely sacred time. But that also is showing that our staff know how valuable this work is, and that they want to be a part of these conversations so that our students are doing better and those relationships are repaired. And then the last challenge we have on here is staffing. Just similar to everybody else, that this takes dedicated staff who are a part of the team. If it was up to me, we would have more deans, more BEAs, and it's not just around it's not just for the suspension piece, but just really or the behaviors in general, but really they're working in so many different ways with our students, and are on the floor and are talking with kids, are building relationships. So those would be the places that we still know that there's challenges, and we continue to work to be just be intentional about how we can move forward regardless of those. And with that, I will pass it on to the next slide.
So I think just quickly, this is obviously the same slide we had shared before. And just to kind of remind everyone that we are sort of still at the beginning of Q2, that we've now collected, we've sort of done a deep dive of what our data has told us, looked at what our schools and the people who are in our schools are telling us, as well as looking at what is working in our schools and seeing how we can replicate that, and what resources, what is needed for that fidelity to implementation to be able to occur, and just sort of learning from the information that we've been able to gather.
Next slide, Chelsea. So before I turn it back over to Holly, just a couple of things I want to wrap up. First of all, Lily, thank you. With the baby, that's the best. That was the best sound all night. Before we turn it back over, there's just a couple additional things. I should have said this at the beginning. I think that no one in this room, and definitely not our team, is happy or can sit well with the data, especially when you look at what has happened over the last 10 years, and when you look at the disproportionality that shows up. That is the reality of where we are, and what we really want to make sure that we do this year and in this conversation and continue throughout the year is to dig in and to really understand districts that have done it well, which is a lot of the work we mentioned at the beginning, and schools that are seeing progress and what they are doing in order to see the improved outcomes for our students. I think East is just a spotlight. We have other schools across the system that we are learning from as well, where there's some really good progress happening. And there's a lot of things that we need to stay the course on in order to actually get the outcomes that I think everyone around this table desires, wants, and what every one of our students deserves. And then just post-COVID, what we're just seeing in terms of some trends is Lana mentioned, not just with our scholars, but also with our staff, that are things that we're continuing to work through to ensure that our students are getting the best experience as possible. So with that, I will turn it back over to you and let you lead the board in the discussion.
Lily, I want to thank you for parenting and showing up to this meeting, and I agree completely with Cindy. It was really nice to hear from your little one, and also like mad respect as a fellow working mom. You don't ever have to apologize for parenting this group. Board Member Vandermillen, you've got your hand up for a while. How you doing?
Yeah, I just have a few questions. I've always been a bit critical of the behavior education plan because I don't think it it has enough teacher input to be able to help our Black, Brown, and disabled and First Nation students. I don't think if you don't have enough planning times, if you do not have small enough class sizes, trying to maintain order and discipline without using alternative practices that are not appropriate, such as seclusion, such as restraint, such as suspensions, tend to happen more rather than less. I think the one thing I would love to see is to hear from the actual teachers on how they can establish, RJ, because I'm not sure, other than giving up the prep period, when they're going to find time. And it's not for not wanting to. I have seen classes where there are 5 to 7 individuals with IEPs and with 27 students. And the teacher is working the hardest they can. But if we don't have enough, the BEP was written for something that was fully staffed. We've never been fully staffed in a way that can fully do that. And I think that's the problem. I think the data is important to show where we need to go, but I don't think it measures what we need to know, which is how do we get individuals not just buy it, but how do we get them to actually cooperate and take part in it? And that's the key. If you don't have time to do it and you can't control the class because you're trying to teach while learning a new curriculum at the same time, I don't know how some of our teachers do it. And it worries me. So those are my comments. My other suggestions. One, have we considered allowing teachers to have back their bell schedule? Right now they're set to Doyle. And oftentimes, I think it could benefit teachers to actually have control over that bell schedule. Number two that I have questions on is on adult to adult discussions and misunderstandings. Is there a provision that their union rep could be there? Is what they say in restorative circles written down and used against them in their file? Because that could affect buy-in. I really wonder if we could make that explicit, we might be able to increase staff buy-in, which I think would be hugely beneficial. Additionally, when are we doing these restorative sessions so that we have a bus schedule that isn't always opportune? How are we doing it so kids can actually participate when they may have after school jobs, they may have other time periods where they can't? And most importantly, I want to hear from the kids themselves on what they think and how they work. I think those would be my ideal suggestions on how to fix the BEP. But the last one I would leave is to allow teachers to be able to use their full range of teaching skills without fear. Right now, I have teachers who are so overwhelmed by so many students that sometimes they feel like they're afraid to even respond because they don't want to seem like they're not trying to be a team player. And that worries me. So I'm hoping we can work on that mindset and help as many as we can. And that's it. I know it was a lot.
Thank you for your remarks, Board Member Vandermillen. I see your hand, Board Member Pearson.
Yeah, I just had a question, in September or October, I think it was the end of September. I got to tour a high school in Milwaukee, Audubon High School, that the core basis of their school safety and core basis of their school is restorative justice, to the point where they were having students, ambassadors, who were then taught how to utilize restorative justice, and then also are the ones who are conducting those circles with their peers. And it was really student focused, and you had some leaders, student leaders throughout the school who would, assist. And then you obviously had like a restorative justice person who was staff member who was dedicated to that, to kind of, help assist or be there to kind of be the adult in that sense. Have we looked at our leaders of our students? And if you guys have, then yeah, I'd like to hear more about that. And then I guess I know that we are looking at how restorative justice is happening throughout Madison. And by no means what I'm going to say is any slight to any school or any person. But if we're having trouble in Madison with our BEP and around suspensions of our Black and brown students, and it's something that we want to change, right? Like, I understand like looking within us to try to find what is happening, but maybe that's not the answer, if that makes sense. Because we have had this space of harm that has happened for decades, like since I was in school, since my mom was in school. And so it's like, although schools are doing great work here and there, are we also looking outside of our school district and seeing maybe where other things that might be existing that we may do with the school? And so those are my two questions.
I can address the question about the youth leadership. There's a long history of that in MMSD going back at least as far as 15 years ago when I was a social worker at Follett, that there's been some fits and starts and some ups and downs to that. Currently, that is a really kind of cornerstone piece of the work that the YWCA is doing in the 3 middle schools where they are. So there are trained youth circle keepers who do exactly what you were describing in those 3 schools. And we are working towards that at the high school. There is some capacity that has been built at the high schools, but there's more to do there. But we are absolutely looking to that because there's so much power and benefit.
Yeah, that's great, especially as students are graduating and moving out and kind of having a pipeline of student leaders.
Right, and we're also looking at kind of building that thread or that pipeline that can sorry, I'm mixing my metaphors here, but we want to be able to call on those older students at times when there are really significant situations going on, maybe in a feeder middle school or an elementary school, and really utilizing their leadership at times, very selectively, of course, because it does ask something of them, but there are some really important ways that we can use them.
Okay, that's good. And just because I know that the harm could be happening from adults to students. And it's not always productive to have the adults in that moment. And so sometimes finding ways that peers can kind of affect other peers and kind of like support them is important. And then just my other question, just about looking outside of MMSD.
I'm gonna have Lily answer that one because Lily's been doing a lot of research. So
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Maya, board member Pearson. I think you're right that while looking at sort of what our data and the work that we're doing internally is helpful, definitely I think looking at what other districts are doing and challenges that maybe they are facing and how they're navigating those, I think absolutely. And so we have sort of pinpointed some districts that either, that we know that are doing some significant work and sort of reaching out to, various members kind of within those districts. Specifically, Lana and Kat and I had a conversation with some of the RJ sort of leads in Oakland's district, because I know they have a very robust restorative justice practice as well. And so kind of continuing that work there, as well as, Minneapolis and St. Paul also, I think it does a lot of really significant restorative work, not just restorative work, but, kind of with a focus on that. So absolutely, I think looking outside of other districts to see how they've navigated maybe some similar challenges and what it takes to sort of see the change that we think we can see with our policy and what changes would need to be made to move that forward. So absolutely.
I appreciate that. And it just actually, I just thought of one other question just really quick. Of how, like, I know we're working with the YWCA around RJ. We all know that a lot of the behaviors and things that are happening with our students in a school setting is not just the school itself. It's a lot of things that are happening externally. And so I guess how are we utilizing not just the YWCA, but other organizations or other kind of entities to help support the work, because obviously the YWCA, although like the work that they do is really great, they're just one organization that is providing that piece for us to help support us. I know there's other organizations that we have been working around with, like mental health and such, but I don't know if you guys want to speak to that and how it kind of goes.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually ask Patrice or Brian if they want to start to speak to that based on all of their community partners, and then we can speak with more globally.
I could share that we right now we've reached out to a couple of different organizations and we've connected very peripherally. And so that work is something that I do want to do, and it's in the pipeline. But right now, for me, I haven't cultivated it to a point that we can leverage it with students and situations like that. I know our admin team does a lot more with connections in the community, but I can just say through the RJ Club, we've already had community members into our RJ Club, and so the seeds are being planted now. And it's most definitely needed. You're spot on with that comment and the question. And right now, it's for me thinking creatively how we can actually have the rubber hit the road with these sharing these resources and building influence in the building. So I appreciate it, and I can say the work has begun and needs to grow.
And just to add to what Brian was saying, we're working on just some partnerships that where, like, you know, just takes a little bit of time to get MOUs and things like that together. Just in terms of even just supporting our students through some of the things that have happened this fall. And I think that is, you know, just thinking about how those are intentional ways for kids to come together in circle and in trusted spaces with trusted adults. So we have some community members that have reached out to us in different organizations that we're in the process of getting things together to support in that area as well. So I think that, you know, we're hoping that those then are going to be larger partnerships that can continue on, not just kind of like a one and done sort of thing, but like how are we intentionally having it be spaces where there are groups coming together, where students are able to utilize the skills of restorative justice, problem solving, you know, nonviolent solutions, things like that we really want our students to gain skills in. And so we're hopeful to continue to build capacity in that area even just this year.
Board Vice President Pearson, do you have further questions?
I do, but I'm good. I'll ask them.
Superintendent Gusted, it seemed like you had your hand up in response to one of Vice President Pearson's questions. Did you want to speak to anything?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Board President Nichols.
Yes, thank you. Let me get my email. So a couple of things that I'm thinking about is really the timeline of updating the plan. So that's kind of where my head is right now. So I wanted to just focus on a few things. The first being the 3 goals. So the goal around using our climate survey to see how students, families, and staff are reporting a sense of safety and a sense of belonging. That still seems like a good goal. Although I'm curious about how we might gather better understanding of what people mean when they're responding to safety.
Exactly.
So I don't know if there's more open-ended empathy listening, focus groups, something that would help us get a better sense of that data point, not only from students, but also staff and families, because I think safe and safety can mean a lot of things. And it's really difficult to know if that data point is improving or decreasing just based on that one response. So that would be, I guess, a hope that we have a plan of really thinking about what people mean when they're responding to that. Goal number 2 is around improving the successful development of foundational practices. And Brian and Patrice, and Lily, thank you so much for kind of bringing to life some of what it looks like to get foundational practices in play. What I hear and this time from the East update, and I've heard it in other BEP updates has been a lot around staff PD. Staff PD, staff PD, staff PD. And I guess it leaves me wondering, right? Like, if our outcomes still look similarly, and we're using foundational practices and PD as like the main lever, I'm not saying that PD isn't necessary. I guess I'm wondering, is it getting us actual shifts in practice, interruptions, in the interactions? And I know we're a human dynamic system, so it's hard to account for every single person in the system. But I am curious, as you all are thinking about an updated plan, like what have we learned about the saturation and the buy-in of foundational practices? And some of these you don't have to answer tonight. It's just, I'm telling you, I guess, where my head is going, because that's a big investment. I heard some nice intersections tonight at East around developmental designs, which was a big recommendation coming out of the student or the wellness advisory, right? Around helping teachers really understand how to have engaging classrooms, as well as layering in some of those restorative conversations and really leaning in on the beliefs. Yeah, and I don't know if East ends up having some improvement in terms of reductions and other data points. I guess I'd be curious to figure out what is the tipping point on getting enough staff believing and doing that we could actually try to do that in more schools across the district. Do you know what I'm saying? It's just 10 years of trying to lay a foundation. Just seems like a really huge investment.
I do want to just respond a
Yeah.
little to that. I don't have the answers, but what we have learned in kind of this last quarter and a half of combing through a ridiculous amount of data, both in terms of what we've received from all the ad hocs, what we've heard from people, what we've also seen in terms of what we've done in terms of implementation or starts of implementation. I think the biggest thing that's coming up for us as a wondering is that we haven't yet fully realized any of those foundational professional learning opportunities at a school. So for example, we have had a lot of staff turnover. So when we look at schools in terms of the percentage of staff that have been trained in developmental designs, with the exception of East and there's two other schools in the district, it is low. East has one of the highest percentages. When it comes to restorative work, restorative practices, we have also been inconsistent in that. We feel like we're finally getting some momentum. So we are also trying to see is if a school actually really commits to this, stays the course and gets their staff trained and has this kind of as the way they're going, will they see a change in outcomes? And because we've done a lot of start and stop and then COVID hit and then we're still trying to like get our footing again, I think that that's one of the places that we can't say, we don't know if it's not working. We don't know if we've actually implemented with integrity yet to know if it will. So that's just where we're at with our learning.
Okay. So thank you for that response. I guess I'm thinking that like, because we're a dynamic human system, we should anticipate there will be turnover. The schools that have high retention rates, whether or not their staff have been trained in developmental designs or if they're fully into RJ, like have we looked at the schools that have high retention, generally high climate and culture, and have maybe done a deeper dive on them? Like, you know what I mean? I guess I just think there's more to learn, and I'm sure you all are in it. But it's just that we've talked about foundational practices as like the cornerstone of making this all work for a long time. And I know we've had a pandemic and we have staff vacancies and turnover and like all the things. And so honestly, I don't have a better solution, but it worries me when that's our cornerstone to making sure that outcomes might head in the direction we're looking for.
I think that's why we also are digging into some of the districts and seeing where people have had success, but you're right, and I don't think we have anything. I would just say that.
Okay. Oh, I don't know.
I was just gonna contribute, in addition to the development of designs and that hardcore work at the school, we'd also have to continue to focus on both the student and the staff, ability to regulate their emotions during. So you can have the best lesson, best design, best restorative justice practice in order, but when things are happening, they have to be able to regulate. So there are some good cortisol studies of teacher efficacy and that sort of thing that have been done by the Center for Healthy Minds on teachers that have had training on mindfulness-based stress reduction and that sort of thing, and how their response when they're doing the work. So there's knowing the work, and then there's being able to regulate yourself doing the work. And we've got also some good looks from them on students responding in similar ways and understanding their emotions. So in order to it's like when I think about being an anti-racist person, you have to be able to know inside of you what is coming up in order to respond effectively. So I think sometimes we want the complexity of what you're talking about is so immense in the human facets of a school building that we continue to need to do this, and this all together in order for us to get growth.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It is all about what comes up in the moment and how you're able to either breathe through it, make a pivot, be self-aware, all of that. So I appreciate that. Okay, the third goal around reducing disproportionality in the use of exclusionary practices, and particularly for our African-American Black students and students with disabilities, that goal definitely feels like something we need to keep our eye on. Although I'm also struck by the fact that you all listed that 47% of total events that are recorded are around classroom disruption. And so it makes me wonder if, in addition to something like goal 3, which is like the big out of school suspension, is there something else that we should be monitoring in this new plan that is around other kinds of behavior? Other kinds of behaviors that are like the most common, and maybe that's a new data point that we should be monitoring, because it feels like there's a lead up. I know they're not always correlated, that the classroom disruptions automatically lead to out of school suspension, but it just feels like if we're committed to progressive discipline, it feels like there should be some other data point that we're monitoring around classroom disruption or something else. I don't know, you all would know the data better. So that's kind of where my head is on the 3 goals, and whether we need to be re-envisioning some updated view based on the learning that you've had. And then the last part, Chair, is just looking at what's coming back to the board and when. So I'm on the slide with quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, and then some. And so it looks like quarter 3 is when you would have some initial policy recommendations coming to the board, and the board giving feedback. And so I guess, I know you may not have it all worked out yet, but I guess what I'm curious is, because there's elementary, middle, and high school, would we be getting a set of policy revisions for like each grade level of the behavior education plan? Would it? With the goals, you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm just trying to envision how we can be thinking about our feedback and the timeliness of that, because sometimes by the time we get something, and I know that you all need the time to work on it, but let me just say my truth. My truth is sometimes by the time we get it, it's like you all need a vote like the next month in order for it to be ready for the summer. And then it feels like it's this pressure cooker of us needing to like digest it all and then make recommendations, or we have feedback. So I'm just curious if Q3, what like in what format might that come to us?
So I would say we don't know yet. I'll answer your other question around levels. As you know, the behavior education plan is written for elementary, middle, and high, but those goals are overarching for all three. So you would see 3 different policies similar to what we brought forth in the past in terms of recommendation. Currently, it's slated to come to the board at the instruction work group in June and then voted on in June is what the current plan is, just in terms of.
Cindy, I do
What?
think we discussed
Really?
though, providing some advanced, like in writing and trying to
Yeah,
scaffold.
we haven't talked, we
just
haven't talked about weekly updates, but
We
right
haven't
now,
scaffolded all of it.
it's per the instruction work group calendar, right? It's in June with the vote.
So is that different than what's in the slide deck? Because right now it says Q3,
I think we would do some kind of-
adjust policy recommendations based on board feedback.
So we haven't finalized process.
Okay.
To be transparent, the idea was that we were thinking we would do some type of updates along the way for the board, depending on, how far we get. So there, as Leah mentioned, there might be something in the weekly update, but the next formal discussion that we would have right now, and this can be changed, right? I mean, this is a conversation, but right now it's June is the next formal update like this, for the vote at the end of June.
Okay. I don't know if that's gonna work. But I'm gonna leave it to Chair Muldrow to figure it out with you guys. I'm just thinking, cause it just seems like I'll speak for myself, but I know there's a number of colleagues on this board who have been eager to talk about changes that will happen with the behavior education plan. So I don't know if like getting it in June and then having to vote the same month is gonna give us the best feedback loop.
So it sounds like the team will meet to talk about what that might look like.
I'm
The
gonna
work group
lob it
chair.
back to.
I think
And then-
there's an interesting opportunity in considering our timeline to factor in the next superintendent and where their leadership plays a role in how we have this conversation and move forward. And so I think that's a conversation for us to have as among board members, and I think it might be something we want to use some retreat time to plan through, but I appreciate you bringing it forward. Further questions or discussions from you, Board President Nichols?
No, those are the big things that stood out. Thank you.
Further questions or discussion? Board Member Mosner Felton?
Great, thank you. Thank you. 2 really quick ones and then longer ones. One is, can someone send me that animated slide in the Board Docs PDF? It's like just.
Yes, I'll work on that with Jesse.
Cool, and it doesn't have to be this minute, like, I'm not gonna look at it this minute.
Fair enough.
And then
All the different.
in the choosing an assessment tool and frameworks, what assessment tool got chosen?
Goal 2.
Sorry, we are looking at a resource that comes out of the Northwest, I can't remember the acronym. Institute of Educational Sciences. So the REL Northwest Institute of Educational Sciences has a whole process for discipline policy review, assessment, and development. And so they actually even lay out like step-by-step meeting 1, meeting 2, in terms of the overall work. But their assessment gives us a really strong starting place to have some dialogue and conversation.
So those are my quick, easy ones. Next is appreciations. leading into those board norms. So I super appreciate, not taking like a one size fits all approach here and saying like, what can we learn and how can we like figure out what each school site is at and how we approach that. I also, East High team, thank you so much for giving us look under the hood. Right, like to get down to like, here's the team structure that we need to put in place. Here's who's on that team. Because that's, those are the considerations that figure out whether or not it's gonna work. So I appreciate you giving us that look. I'm like a little devastated that I don't work at Madison East. But I'll survive it. But I do think like having that look under the hood, like the considerations for staffing, for prep time, for scheduling, like they come up over and over again and they're perennial because they're like serious issues and whether or not we can serve students. And I think sometimes like when you're at like a really high level, you're like, oh, everyone's always talking about staffing, everyone's always talking about time, but like everyone's already talking about it because like this is what makes a difference when you're trying to actually implement. And I'm going to reiterate, I'm super curious about what happens in not just bell schedules, but annual schedules and like to what extent this provides opportunities for us to like build those supportive communities for students. I also the timeline freaks me out a little. Not just because like, are we going to have enough time to talk as a board, but like, are staff and school going to have enough time to adjust to these changes? I'm thinking about like just the like anxiety as a building level staff when you're like, I don't know what all is going to show up in my inbox on August 15th. And if it's going to mean that all my planning work on my leadership team is like bunk. Did we allocate correctly for the changes that are coming, right? Like people are making staffing choices in February for potential changes that haven't been named yet. And so that concerns me. I'm curious in that slide about like the alignment and misalignment, like, I guess this is a question probably for Lily. Like, what does it mean? Like, what does it tell you when you're like, okay, 47% of total documented events are about like, I don't want to be in this class. I don't like how you whatever it looks like. Like, I'm curious, like that's so interesting. And it's not really surprising, but like, I'm just curious, like, what's the initial thinking about that? And I can pause there because I am kind of curious about just like what's in your mind about that.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, that data point to me is, I think much like you just voiced, is telling, but maybe not surprising. And I think what it tells me, I think what it signals to us is that if we're saying that a guiding principle is having, students engaged in their classrooms, right? Then we know that where we see a high level of students leaving class without permission or disrupting class or remaining in the hallway, then we know that there is at least a contributing factor is that maybe that engagement, there's a gap there at that engagement, right? And I think, that's sort of why we wanted to lift the importance of developmental designs as a way to create and continue to promote and prioritize that engagement within classrooms. I think what it also tells me, and I think this is not just for those particular behaviors, but probably throughout, is that I think COVID had a significant impact in the learning and potential loss of learning that students experienced. And what I think it also can tell us is that a contributing factor is that where students experienced perhaps a larger loss of learning or just struggles and trauma around that year of not being in person in schools, that we're going to be in a position where we're continually trying to make up that gap. And sort of, when there's a significant loss of learning, I think that can directly then impact a student's feeling of comfort in a classroom where maybe they are feeling like there is a little bit of a gap. So I think that it's a number of contributing factors, but that's, I think, what it tells me.
I appreciate hearing your thoughts about that. And then to sort of connect with that, I think a lot about like how much time when things are hot, like it takes to really restore the community that you're trying to build. You know, like lots of little times you're like, oh, you were super rude to me. You have a quick conversation and it's like, well, you were rude to me first. And I'm like, yeah, I'm really sorry about that. I was tired. I really apologize. I won't do it again. Right. And it's quick. And then other times it's like much bigger, right? And students have righteous anger about like the society that we live in, right? And like are acting that out in the like in one of the main institutions that they engage with as young people. And so I'm curious, when we think about restorative justice, when we think about safety broadly, like, is there room to conceptualize our BEP as something that gives us information about how we change our system-wide instructional practices and our curriculum goals and our broader goals for learning? So that's just something I think about a lot. The last thing that I'll say about that is no, that's all I'll say about that. Thank you a lot to everybody who's working on this. Extra shout out to school-based teams. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Further question or discussion? All right, I'm gonna add myself to the stack if folks we haven't heard from still want to speak. We'd love to hear from you. I think it's really challenging to have a conversation about disproportionality of Black students without talking about the real racial implications of disproportionality when it comes to discipline. And one of my questions has continued to be, when does behavior indicate that a student needs compassion? When does behavior indicate that a student needs tutoring? When do we notice that a student has a pattern of being disruptive because they're struggling in a specific area, and were they to have support in that area, that behavior would change? When do we notice when behavior is prompted by the relationship a student has with an adult? Meaning the student has been with us for 6 years, never really seen this behavior, and now in this class, there's always an issue. When do we recognize those things and how do we reconcile them? The other thing I want to say is, you know, about 1.5 years ago, every single member of this Board of Education voted to look at our middle school program specifically and holistically, right? Because the behavior we see at the middle school level is also about engagement in the classroom, right? So what is happening with our middle school students? And to see the spike in suspension and the disproportionality in that spike is something I think we've all seen coming and have tried to talk about for a while and need to address pretty proactively. As a parent of a middle schooler, I'm willing to say, like, I have experienced firsthand where our discipline hurts kids. And so I've seen a student, my own student, enter school in 6th grade and feel great about school and excited to be there, and get in more and more trouble in 7th grade, in alignment with going through puberty, in alignment with developing as a young woman, and become less and less trusting of her school, engaged in her school, interested in her school. So that student, my student, was suspended, and I didn't see a tremendous turnaround in her behavior. In fact, she went from having 23 referrals her first semester to having 56 her second semester. So I'm not just talking about disproportionality, I'm talking about responses to behavior that actually work. And I think we continue to have this conversation without talking about responses to behavior that actually work, which is why it was really, really great to hear from Principal Hutchins and Brian. I have to say, you all were the light to this presentation for me. And the only questions I have tonight are for you, which is, how do we sustain the work you're doing? How do we support the work you're doing? How do we invest in the work that you all are doing at East? And I want to aim that question at Principal Hutchins, because you've worked at I want to say 3 out of 4 of our comprehensive high schools. And so you've seen how this is working in our different schools over the course of the last 10 years of the VEP.
You know, it's interesting. I think when we were talking before about just like I think Nichelle brought up, like, how do we keep this going, or how do we like continue the momentum, right? It is really around staff retention and having staff in the same building in order to really build momentum around things. And I think part of that is having time for staff to be out of buildings and learning and engaging in some of this work, not having it always be around giving up their preps or during the summer or things like that. So like money for subs, opportunities for folks to come together is so important. You know, where are the spaces for people to push in? We have a really amazing instructional coaching team. And it's like, how are they able to come into classrooms, give feedback, amongst all of the other things that they're doing, but also where's the space for like us to have subs so teachers can get into each other's classrooms and see the amazing things they're doing. Or, hey, like we know something really awesome that's happening at Memorial. How are we able to get over there or get to another school district to the point and be able to bring teams places and then bring that back, that learning back to East. I think that we have so some of the most amazing educators at East High School, and they really do, they truly care about our students and they want to continue to grow and they want to continue to learn and learn with each other. And I think part of that is being able to sometimes step out of the classroom and get those opportunities. So I think like, you know, any opportunity that or any funding for that, it's hard, right? Like we also know that for a lot of teachers, missing one day in the building feels like you have to do makeup for like 3 or 4 days, depending on who took over your class that day. And so that's just a very real struggle that we have. And so then it ends up being like, you know, it's a PD day and we try to fit in a ton of stuff while we're also like packing because people are moving and we're also you know, like they're moving classrooms, and then we're also trying to give them time to just breathe and do wellness and all that stuff. So all that to say, like, really, I think our staff are really interested in a lot of different things, and we have the right people, and they want to continue to grow. And so just providing opportunities and funds for them to dig into that would be really, really helpful. Like I just think about, you know, even with Brian and like our RJ team, like they meet at lunch. That's awesome that we have so many teachers and staff who are willing to give up their time at lunch. But like, what could, you know, the opportunity of like what could be done during days away, or like what could be done when we have opportunities for students to come together, like all of those different pieces. So for me, like I feel like where I've seen the biggest growth is right when we have the people, we have the right people in the right place, and we have the funds and the time and the permission for them to learn with and from each other. I think that that just, I think, can move so many, just the work in so many really amazing areas, because again, we have pockets of awesome things happening, just thinking through the high schools, right? Amongst our high schools that we want to continue to learn from each other. And that really, that costs so much less than, you know, travel and all these other pieces. But I think that if we find something elsewhere, like how can we bring that back? And, you know, we would love to have people coming over and digging in around developmental designs, things like that. Like, just want to shout out, like some of our teachers are doing amazing work in that area. Megan Willauer is a math teacher and an ESL teacher who is leading in that work. She's a trainer, and her classroom is like honestly like a thing of beauty to watch. And so like, how are people able to come see the really good work with the people who are doing it and really embodying what's happening?
Principal Hutchins, I want to thank you for your commitment to our district and to our students. and for your leadership and the fact that you have embedded your leadership with so much compassion over the years. And also thank you for shouting out your team, including Principal Smith, for the fact that it takes the entire community's buy-in and commitment to this in order for it to work. And I think you've given us some really clear examples of how we as a board can think about investing in this work and sustaining the really powerful work you all are doing at East. The last thing I want to say about the data we're presented with is that it would be easy to look at that data and go, our students, our Black students are just more likely to be disruptive. They are just behaving poorly more frequently. I went to school in MMSD. I have children in this district, and what I know is that is not true. What I know is Black children are targeted for discipline, and they are disproportionately represented in things that do not work and are damaging, and they are underrepresented in opportunities that promote their success and well-being. And so if we are going to shift disproportionality in terms of things that are damaging, we have to shift disproportionality in terms of opportunities that are beneficial simultaneously. And that's why I think this has to be a holistic conversation, and why I want to urge us to have this conversation in a holistic way about what we're doing at the middle school level. And so that is my hope in terms of how we can continue this conversation, is that we have it, we expand the dialogue we have beyond the BEP to a conversation around engagement and behavior that allows for us to more thoroughly investigate what our young people need from us. Further discussion or questions, my fellow board members? All right. Anything from you, our superintendent, before we close out this evening?
Just briefly, it is refreshing to sit and listen as we all talk about how to create the conditions in the school that create a sense of belonging in a place where teachers can do their best work. I am encouraged around this conversation about having a specific focus on middle schools, thinking about what's there. It only makes sense to me that if that's what our data is telling us, that we have some sort of a strategy around that includes not just this narrow focus on what the BEP and the policy is, but about how are those students experiencing life in middle school and what contributes to their sense of belonging, and how do we then support those grownups in a building to engage in the right. So I'm very heartened by that. I think this has been a really good conversation. I do think we have some direction as a team about some things to talk about next, and just want to thank the board for that feedback this evening.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Gubstead. Thank you, my fellow board members, for investing in these two conversations so thoroughly this evening. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, aye. Motion carries 7-0. Have a nice night, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, team.